with runes as he whispered in Parcel tongue. The bowl pulsed silver. He first placed a delicate pinch of ashes of rebirth taken from a phoenix that had been reborn only hours earlier. They were faintly warm to the touch and radiated immense heat, as he had infused some fire-type materials into them. Next came a sliver of frost silk serpent fang, found only in magical tundras where creatures had adapted to sub-zero environments. The venom had been neutralized, but the cold essence remained unnaturally piercing, yet clear and focused. Then came crimson ice petals, flowers grown atop enchanted peaks that bled flame when struck with wind. Their magic danced between both elements fire and frost. He placed his wand in the center and whispered a ritual phrase in Parcel tongue. The air rippled around him. The ingredients melted into the wand as Eric's magic pulled them in, layer by layer. His silver flame stirred faintly at his fingertips but did not ignite. This was a quiet process. When he lifted the wand again, its surface had shifted. The wood remained dark, but now faint frost fractals lay under its surface, radiating heat. A thin line of silver ran along the grain as fire and ice balanced and complemented each other. A/N, the second years will start in the next chapter. Thoughts and stones please. Chapter 29, Luna Lovegood and the Salamander Rebellion. I will visit you whenever I can and maybe you can come to us too? Do whatever old people do, Eric was talking to Elder Huo when his last comment earned him a bonk on the head. Elder Huo patted his disciple's head. I'll visit sometime soon. I've made sure to push all my responsibilities onto the sect master. A man needs to rest, you know. The master and disciple both grinned at that. Elder Huo then brought out a small booklet from his sleeve. This is everything I've noted about using flame in combat. Keep it. Improve on it. Receiving the gift, Eric returned the gesture, offering the elder some rare herbs that nourished flame along with a few magical materials only found on Nightshade Island. Harry said goodbye to the friends he'd made during the visit. That night, the family returned to Nightshade Castle to spend one last night, then left for their main mansion the following morning. The next day, Eric, Harry, and Nibbin went to Diagon Alley for second-year shopping. As they walked around, Harry drew whispers from many Muggle-borns, while Eric got more attention from older students and pure-blood families. After all, he had killed a troll in his first year and was heir to what many now called the most powerful wizarding family in modern Britain. On the way to Flourish and Blotts, they saw a massive crowd gathered for autographs. Gilderoy Lockhart was in full performance mode, basking in the attention like a niffler in a gold vault. As soon as he spotted Harry and Eric, his grin widened unnaturally, and he strutted toward them, dragging them into a photo and handing out self-signed books before either could say a word. Soon after, they bumped into the Weasleys. "Hello, Harry and Eric. Is that a bright frog in your arms, Harry?" "It's bloody big," Ron commented, eyeing Pyrrha. He earned a slap to the back of the head from Mrs. Weasley for his language. Ginny was half hiding behind her mother, occasionally peeking at Harry, earning Harry a playful poke and a grin from Eric. To the side, Mr. Weasley noticed Lucius Malfoy. Lucius hadn't seen Eric yet, as the boy was partially hidden among the crowd. As the two adults began bickering, which naturally escalated into a physical scuffle, Draco tried to disappear behind a shelf. Eric, spotting him, smirked. "Draco! Where are you going? Come give your brother a hug." Draco's face turned pale. "Who's Draco? And why are you walking toward me? I've never seen you before in my life." Lucius looked up sharply, catching sight of Eric and hastily adjusting his composure. Arthur was already being dragged away by Molly as Lucius stood straight and offered a strained smile. "Eric, it's good to see you getting along with Draco and looking after him," Lucius said smoothly, even as Draco tried to wriggle free of Eric's grip. Eric greeted him politely, and Draco, despite his embarrassment, was roped into tagging along with Eric and Harry for the rest of their shopping. He refused to acknowledge Lucius's existence for the remainder of the day. A few days later, the family got ready for the journey to King's Cross Station. Edwina hugged both boys tightly. This time, Harry also got the same piece of motherly advice: don't hit girls. Simon gave a quiet farewell and walked them to the platform. On the way, they met up with Daphne and Draco. The four chatted casually, boarded the train, and found a compartment. Draco eventually left to sit with his usual Slytherin group, claiming they were his friends and not lackeys. Ron joined the group with Ginny in tow. Daphne smiled at her. "Come, sit with me. Let's not sit with the animals over there," she said, nodding toward Eric and Ron, who were currently trying to transfigure Scabbers into a teacup. Ginny, though shy, was comfortable enough with Daphne to sit beside her. "What's that?" Daphne asked Harry, pointing at Pyrrha curled in his lap. Harry blinked. "It's a salamander. We're good friends." The girls in the compartment immediately crowded around Pyrrha, cooing and asking to hold her. "You're not allowed to have salamanders as pets at school," came a voice from the doorway. Hermione Granger stood there, arms crossed. "Thank you for that crucial legal update," Eric said dryly. "We were going to serve time in Azkaban if you hadn't intervened. Quick, let's throw her out the window before we get caught." He made an exaggerated motion toward the salamander. Hermione snatched Pyrrha out of his hands and glared at him while hugging the creature tightly. "How could you?" gasped the three girls in unison as they launched an attack on Eric, joined gleefully by Harry. A few minutes later, Eric sat bruised and beaten on one side of the compartment while Pyrrha basked in attention from the girls. Harry threw a betrayed look her way. Just as Eric was recovering, the compartment door slid open again. A girl stood there, perhaps a year younger, her pale blonde hair falling in messy waves and wide, silvery grey eyes full of daydreams. She was holding the quibbler upside down in one hand and keeping the door open with the other. "Hello," she said serenely. "You've got a salamander in here. That's very lucky. They keep away the Rackspurts." Everyone stared. Eric blinked twice. Hermione tilted her head. What? "Rackspurts," the girl replied, stepping inside. "They float into your ears and make your brain go fuzzy. But she pointed at Pyrrha, would scare them off. Bright creatures like her always do." "Ah, a recognized Rackspurt-repelling guardian," Eric muttered with mock seriousness. "We were wondering if we'd be safe this year." "Good to know Pyrrha pulls double duty." Harry tried not to laugh. Failed. Ron leaned over to Daphne. "Is she real?" "I hope so," Daphne whispered back. "I'm Luna. Luna Lovegood. I'll be starting Hogwarts this year. Probably Ravenclaw. My mum was one before the accident with the spell that went backward." "I'm sorry to hear that," Harry said, remembering what Edwina had taught him. But Luna just smiled. "It's all right. I can still hear her in the wind sometimes." There was a beat of silence before Eric slowly clapped. "Congratulations, Luna. That's officially the most poetic thing said on this train ride." Luna giggled, then offered Pyrrha a small treat, which the salamander happily accepted. She chatted comfortably with the group, eccentric, yes, but not so outlandish that no one could even have a chat with her. "I hoped I'd make lots of friends when I got to Hogwarts," Luna said, looking around at the others. "And my wish came true before I even got to the school." Without a word, Daphne hugged her. "When you get sorted into Ravenclaw," she said firmly, "I'll protect you forever." Luna giggled in her arms as, unknowingly, she gained several very devoted protectors. A/N, I know what you're thinking. Luna and Daphne should both be the FMLs. Go to horny jail. Bonk. Thoughts and Stones, Friends. Chapter 30, Incendio and Idiots. The kids reached Hogwarts and were led to the Thestral carriages. Harry and Eric patted the gentle creatures and handed them small treats. The other students were confused at first until they saw the food vanish mid-air as the Thestrals accepted them. That was enough explanation. Luna had been separated from them for the boat ride across the lake, as per first-year tradition. The second years gathered to watch the sorting ceremony again. Even Eric paid attention, curious if any changes had occurred due to his presence in the magical world. Meanwhile, somewhere hidden, Dobby was being scolded. "You're not supposed to interfere like that." Nibbin huffed, arms folded as he glared at the other elf. What if the masters had crashed into the wall and gotten hurt? Is that how you protect someone? Dobby's ears drooped low. Dobby just wanted to help Harry Potter, sir. Dobby will punish himself later for almost hurting him. Nibbin's eyes widened. He knew the customs of some old wizarding families and how they treated their elves. His voice softened. No. No punishing yourself. That's not how we do things. Come, I'll teach you how we help masters properly. Back in the Great Hall, Luna was sorted into Ravenclaw and walked over to sit with Eric and Daphne. That earned confused looks from the other Ravenclaws, but neither Luna nor Daphne seemed to care. Classes were about to begin when Harry pulled Eric aside, holding Pyrrha tightly in his arms. "Professor McGonagall says I can't keep her in school," he said, clearly upset. "What should we do?" Eric thought for a second and grinned. "Let's appeal the decision. Go straight to the top." Harry submitted a request to speak to Dumbledore, which was approved without delay. They made their way to the headmaster's office, where Eric guessed passwords aloud until the door simply opened. "You were very close, my boy," Dumbledore said, smiling as they entered. "Please, sit. What can I help you with?" Harry explained the situation while holding Pyrrha in his arms. "She's connected to me, Professor. It's like she's part of me. Is there any way we can stay together? She's a good girl. She won't hurt anyone." As if to punctuate his words, Pyrrha hopped out of his arms and wandered over to Fawkes, the phoenix. The two creatures chirped softly to one another, their interaction was gentle and harmonious. Dumbledore observed them both. "Fawkes seems to like her. And you're not wrong, the bond you two share is powerful." He gently inspected the magical mark on Harry's wrist. "Very powerful magic indeed. I've never seen anything quite like it. Where did you learn this?" Eric spoke up. "We visited a sect in China this summer. It was part of a cultural exchange. They taught us how to create magical bonds with certain creatures." And Eric explained the situation to Dumbledore. Dumbledore nodded slowly, thoughtful. "You're a kind boy, Harry. And familiars, well, they are a deep part of the magician they are bonded to. I won't separate the two of you, that would just be cruel. I'll speak to the staff. Pyrrha stays." Harry beamed and gave the old headmaster a spontaneous hug. Dumbledore blinked in surprise, then chuckled and returned the gesture, patting Harry's head. Eric smiled faintly from the side. The next day, Gryffindor and Ravenclaw had charms together. Professor Flitwick was moving around the classroom, helping students master Incendio. 10 points to Ravenclaw, he called after watching Eric's execution of the spell. Eric had asked a few questions that were well beyond second-year level, and though surprised, Flitwick answered them with enthusiasm. Harry, too, was performing with increased control, likely due to his magical link with Pyrrha. Defense against the dark arts, however, was another story. Lockhart was insufferable. He insisted on asking questions about himself during class and gave out homework that amounted to reading his own books and summarizing his heroic feats. "And that is how I defeated a giant and saved a village using a masterful protego and conf Ringo," Lockhart declared dramatically. The girls clapped. Eric had a sudden, terrible idea. "Professor, would you be willing to demonstrate that technique for the class? A dramatic reenactment might help us understand better." Lockhart's grin widened. "Excellent suggestion. Let me convey my full majesty. Eric, my boy, help me with the performance." Eric was directed to stand on the far side of the classroom, well out of the spotlight. "Now," Lockhart said, "cast a spell at me. I shall defend with my protego." Eric raised his wand and cast a mild incendio, still a strong spell by most second-year standards. Lockhart's eyes widened. He raised his shield in panic and barely deflected the flame, ending up with singed robes. Eric made the movements slow and clear so the students could learn and spoke the spell clearly even though he could cast it silently. Still, he turned dramatically. "That weak spell cannot even graze me, foul creature," he shouted. "Conf Ringo." Rather than aim at Eric, he blasted a wooden dummy off to the side, which exploded into smoking shards. Eric made a habit of manipulating Lockhart's need for attention. The professor liked putting on shows, and those shows often ended up accidentally educational. Eric milked it. Lockhart liked putting up shows, so he would do them in his other classes too, which lead to the kids actually learning something. "Professor, may I create a club to help students go over the homework and discuss your books after classes?" Eric asked with innocent eyes. Lockhart lit up. "Of course. A fan club? Oh, an academic club, yes, very good. Here, let me sign your permission slip." Eric now had a club for himself, and the first members were Daphne, Harry, Ron, Hermione, and some of his other classmates. Draco would also visit often, as Eric would teach actual defensive spells in the club. Luna joined later that week and turned out to be unexpectedly gifted in charms. Casting was like an intuition to her. Though she kept quiet about it, Luna had already begun facing bullying from a few of the older Ravenclaw girls. It wasn't cruel yet, but it simmered. Harry also helped out in the club. His practical skill with Pyrrha at his side was impressive, and even Draco learned from him and would learn from each other, to the disapproval of Ron, but he would just focus on other things at those times. "Very good, my boy," Lockhart said one afternoon, interrupting a club session. "Today, I suggest you all discuss voyages with vampires. I'll leave a signed copy." He placed it on the desk proudly and strolled out. Eric took the book with a sigh. "All right, who wants to set Lockhart on fire today?" Hands shot up. Harry stepped forward with Pyrrha perched beside him. "I want to practice coordination with her. She's been learning how to launch short fire bursts." Eric then stooped Lockhart in the hallway and asked him for help as his students needed him. Harry stepped in, wanting to learn how to coordinate with Pyrrha and learn to fly with her by his side. Harry would use spells to reduce the mobility of Lockhart, and Pyrrha would be the one throwing fire at the man. She was also getting better at throwing fire in short bursts like fireballs. Luna was levitating a stack of books with perfect ease while Ron failed to summon a feather. Hermione offered unwanted advice. Daphne and Eric were leering spells to the side as Hermione and Luna joined them after a bit. A/N, Thoughts and Stones, my people. Chapter 31, First Victim. 2 months had passed in the second year at school, and the Golden Trio were returning from the feast when Harry felt a burning sensation, and Pyrrha in his arms became a little restless. Pyrrha then jumped down from his arms and started walking in a direction, indicating them to follow through Harry's connection. The trio followed her silently. When they reached a dim corridor, they found Filch's cat, Mrs. Norris, hanging upside down. She had black marks on her body and an expression of pure terror on her face, her mouth wide open and her eyes frozen. The trio were horrified and completely paralyzed by the sight. A scream then came from behind as Filch came running forward and gathered Mrs. Norris into his arms. Murmurs erupted from behind as some other students arrived, followed quickly by a few teachers. Eric was among the students who arrived, and he was immediately confused. "The basilisk is with me, so why is this happening? This doesn't even seem like petrification. Is this a curse?" His musings were cut short by another scream. You've killed her. I'll kill you. You were here before anyone else." Filch yelled at the children and ran toward Harry to strike him, but Eric stepped in front of him and pushed him back. Pyrrha placed herself protectively in front of Harry, radiating heat and growling low. Filch stumbled back in fear, feeling as though he might be burned alive if he made a move. "Calm down, Argus," came an elderly voice from the side as Dumbledore arrived. He moved closer and inspected Mrs. Norris with a few spells before speaking. She is not dead, Argus, she is, in need of medical attention, he concluded, his words slow and deliberate. Filch calmed slightly, too shaken to notice the hesitation in Dumbledore's voice. He did it. He and his friends. She must have caught them doing something dark and they silenced her with this magic. Harry called Pyrrha back to him, or she might have scorched Filch on the spot. Snape sneered from the side. While I believe the boy must be up to something, he's far too daft and dim-witted to perform such magic. Snape's words silenced Filch for the moment, though his glare didn't falter. It didn't bother Harry, who met his eyes calmly. He had learned a lot from Simon and wasn't easily intimidated anymore. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware, read a troll-looking Slytherin from the wall, sneering. Shut up, Flint, Draco muttered from the side, silencing the idiot. Perhaps we should continue this conversation in my office, Professor, Lockhart suggested to Dumbledore, beckoning the trio, Eric and the teachers to follow. Lockhart's office was exactly what one would expect. The man was clearly obsessed with himself, and even his portraits were busy grooming their hair. As the group entered, Dumbledore spoke first. Do not worry, Harry. You are not in trouble. Can you enlighten us on what you saw when you entered the corridor? Dumbledore asked calmly. Harry explained everything that happened, and Ron and Hermione quickly chimed in to support his version of events. Filch sat to the side, on the verge of tears, while Mrs. Norris had already been taken to the infirmary. Snape eyed Harry with skepticism. And why, may I ask, were you there at the exact moment this occurred? What are you hiding, Potter? He said, stepping closer to intimidate him only for Pyrrha to growl from Harry's arms. I believe Mr. Potter, Dumbledore intervened gently. And I imagine he must be tired. Please go straight to your dormitories and to bed. Snape backed off, although his eyes lingered on the boy. Lockhart, of course, began implying that Harry had done it all for attention, jealous, perhaps, of his glorious presence. But everyone ignored him. Later that evening, Harry and Eric were in Hagrid's hut. What are you making? Harry asked, watching Eric stir something in a large cauldron. Here are the things you asked for, Eric. Norberta was happy to help, knowing it was for you, Hagrid said cheerfully as he entered, carrying a small satchel. Inside were some iridescent dragon scales and a sealed vial of dragon's blood, both from Norberta. Thank you, Hagrid. I'm making a broth for Pyrrha, Eric answered, carefully adding the new ingredients. Harry knelt beside him as the potion began to simmer with a faint red glow. Once it was ready, Eric ladled some into a shallow dish and handed it to Harry. Feed her by hand, he said. She'll like the pampering. Harry did just that. Pyrrha happily accepted the warm broth, drinking it all before curling up on the floor beside the fire. But after a few moments, her body began to glow with radiant heat. Even Eric took a cautious step back from the intensity. But Harry felt nothing. He walked toward her instead, drawn by the connection between them. The mark on his left hand began to glow brightly. As he scooped Pyrrha into his arms, her mark lit up too and briefly caught fire. The glow faded a few moments later, and Harry gently placed her down again. Pyrrha was now slightly larger, and her skin was tinged with faint red streaks beneath the usual blue. The transformation was subtle, but powerful. Harry, too, seemed changed. He looked at his palm and focused, and a swirl of red and blue flame danced into existence above it. That went better than expected, Eric commented from the side as Harry exclaimed, "Wicked," and hugged him enthusiastically. They experimented a little and found that Harry's flame could be used for offensive magic, and not anything else like beast flames, and used for alchemy and potion making. Not that it bothered Harry. He was not interested in potion making anyway. They then went to the forest, as after some time they met up with Norberta, who was now as large as a small truck. It takes normal dragons 10 to 15 years to reach that size. Norberta started sniffing Pyrrha as soon as they appeared. Pyrrha got down from Harry's arms and the dragon and the salamander started playing as some other magical beings appeared too, as they seemed to be the underlings of Norberta. A/N, Power Stones guys, we need to climb the charts. Chapter 32, Dueling Club. The Quidditch match happened, but the bludger was not enchanted and was completely normal. Harry did win the match by basically falling on the snitch and breaking his arm during the fall. Colin Creevey was found in the same state that the cat was in, when Harry was in the hospital after the Gryffindor vs Slytherin Quidditch match. Harry overheard the conversation that Colin did manage to take a picture with his camera, as it was not destroyed, and the picture showed a black and green glowing smoke coming towards him. Harry told Eric about the discovery. Eric was concerned about what was happening, as this time the students were not petrified, but a curse had taken hold of them and this time it might be truly fatal for the students. During this time, Lockhart was making a plan to form a dueling club, as it would provide his magnificent presence to the students and reduce their fears. The club took place with students from all the houses present. "Eric, my boy, how about you help me with the club as you have done with the other book club?" Lockhart asked cheerfully, genuinely thinking Eric was his biggest fan. "Perhaps we should start with a demonstration in Expelliarmus." Snape chimed in, annoyed. At this point, Lockhart knew his limits and knew he would be humiliated by Snape, as he sometimes had a hard time even against Eric, who was just a student. So, he didn't go in front himself and instead put Eric in the spotlight. "Let's start with teaching the students. I don't think us dueling would help them much, as they would just see me move my wand and you flying backward," Lockhart said, making excuses in the most Lockhart way as Snape had a look of utter fury on his face. Eric stepped forward and grinned at Snape. "I await your instructions, Professor," he said as they performed the dueling rituals, bowing and stepping back. They both turned around as Snape cast Expelliarmus loudly, because it was, after all, a lesson for the students. Eric, however, simply dodged and cast his own Expelliarmus, causing Snape to raise a Protego. Snape looked at Eric in confusion for a moment as they exchanged a few more spells. They kept themselves limited to third-year spells at most, and always shouted their incantations and made proper wand movements so the students could see clearly. Hermione, who was watching the duel, was writing down notes as if possessed, and even told Harry and Ron to do the same with her so she wouldn't miss anything. Some other students, mainly Ravenclaws, were doing the same, while others simply stood to the side with wide eyes. Eric was enjoying himself as he dodged an incendio and cast Chillaria Maxima. A stream of ice shards came out of his wand, accompanied by mist that impaired Snape's vision and bombarded him with ice like flying daggers, forcing him on the defensive for the first time during the duel. Snape waved his wand, conjured a gust of wind, and transfigured the stage to block the ice shards. He then cast Incendira Vortex to summon a flame from his wand to counter the remaining shards that passed through his defenses. During this time, Eric could have done many things to push Snape back further, but then Snape could also stop holding back, and it would turn into a real duel, which it was not supposed to be. So Eric stopped sending out ice as Snape dealt with the last of it. They both looked at each other for a moment and bowed, although Eric did notice a wound on Snape but didn't comment. Eric then moved to Lockhart's side and noticed cold sweat on the man's forehead but didn't comment on it either. The hall was silent for a full 10 seconds until, starting from Gryffindor, all the houses began cheering and calling out Eric's name. Snape then called out Draco, and Lockhart called out Harry on stage. The boys smiled at each other and bowed before taking a dueling stance. Harry started with an Expelliarmus, which Draco blocked with Protego, following up with an Incendio. Harry did not have Pyrrha by his side, as that would have been unfair. They exchanged spells, and Draco cast Serpensortia, summoning a snake to distract Harry, and followed up with Incendio, which Harry blocked. They both stopped as they saw the snake moving toward a Hufflepuff student named Justin. Draco was about to unsummon the snake, but Harry instinctively used Parseltongue to tell the snake to back off. It listened to Harry but still hissed at Justin when he made a sudden movement. Snape stepped in and vanished the snake as the entire year stared at Harry. What were you thinking? You told the snake to attack me. Are you mad, Potter? Justin yelled angrily. The students began whispering at that. The class was still not over, though, as Eric was instructing the students who were actually obeying. He told them to form groups of 3, where 2 would cast Expelliarmus at each other while the third would keep an eye out to make sure no one got hurt, and they would rotate after every attempt. Harry and Eric were to the side practicing. Don't worry, Harry. They'll come around, Eric said, consoling Harry. I can see that they're just scared, because of the reputation around Parseltongue, Harry replied. Eric looked at Ron and Hermione and saw worry on their faces but no distrust. At least you have friends worth keeping, Eric concluded, as Harry smiled and nodded. Pyrrha also jumped onto his shoulder as a show of support. After the class, Ron and Harry were talking about what happened as Hermione was blasting Eric with questions which he answered patiently. A/N, after the Harry Potter arc I am thinking of other universes, the family will be going to different universes with the island and Eric's other properties added to it. What are your thoughts on it? And give me stones, my people. Chapter 33, The Diary. Eric had noticed that Ginny was growing paler with time and had also started skipping meals. This worried him, as it indicated she might have the diary. Ron once came up to Eric while he and Harry were discussing something. I need you guys' help. Ginny has been very distant with me, and it seems like she hasn't eaten properly in days. Harry grew worried at that. Did you try talking to her in your way, or did you ask her gently what happened? He asked. Ron frowned at Harry's question but then answered, I'm not an idiot. I was very patient with her and even asked if she was sick. I told her I wanted to take her to Madame Pomfrey, but she refused. Harry patted Ron's shoulder, thinking of a way to help. As Harry was thinking, Hermione also joined the group and was brought up to speed on the situation. Ron, ever tactful, said, You're apparently a girl, so you should know how to help Ginny. Hermione smacked him on the head for that. Can we make a rejuvenating potion for her? Ron asked, rubbing his head. Hermione thought about it and said, We can't get the materials. And even if we could, where would we make the potion? Eric grinned from the side. Don't worry about the ingredients. Just find a place to make the potion. Harry asked from the side, How will you be getting the ingredients? Eric shrugged. By owl. You can do it too. Send the owl to the handler of your Gringotts account with the list of ingredients you want. They'll arrange them for you and send them back via owl, they deduct the money as well. Harry was surprised at how simple it was. Is that allowed? Hermione asked. Obviously. That's how students get potion ingredients to practice for exams, Eric replied. The ingredients arrived in 3 days as Hermione found a place to brew the potion. It was of course Moaning Myrtle's bathroom. The previous day was the day that Justin was found in the same state as the others. This attack was the third and created an aura of fear in Hogwarts. Parents were sending letters to their kids every day. People were also speaking to shut down Hogwarts until the threat is taken care of. This was the time that the Minster in his infinite wisdom was considering that Hagrid must be thrown back in Azkaban to appease people, and Lucius pushed for it too. He also wished for Dumbledore's suspension. The kids met up in Moaning Myrtle's bathroom as they prepared the potion. Hermione was the one preparing the potion. She insisted she would make the potion and Eric must help her. So she was make the potion right now as Eric was helping her make it properly. Eric had gotten the ingredients by sending a letter to Nook via Owl, and he asked Nibbin to get ingredients from the castle that would be useful against dark magic. He was making a potion for both physical and mental rejuvenation and remove any darkness caused by the diary that might hinder her future growth. Not that the other knew about the last part. They made the potion at night and were planning to give Ginny the potion in the morning. You guys leave before me, I will tidy. They offered to help but Eric shooed them away. Eric then went to a bathroom stall and took out a diary from there, ignoring moaning Myrtle, who was complaining about people throwing things at her. Eric took the diary to his room and started writing in it. "Hi, I am Eric," we wrote as he got a reply from the diary. As the ink he wrote in faded and new words appeared. "Hello, I am Tom Marvolo Riddle." Eric grinned at that. He felt a probe at his mental shields, but it was too weak to breach them. A/N, bonus chapter today as I had time. I want stones. Chapter 34, A Diary of Blood and Flame. Eric put the diary in a container he had prepared that would contain it and not allow its influence to reach out. He had prepared for it beforehand and gotten it from the castle. The next day by the school lake in the evening, when no students were around, Ron was talking to Ginny as Eric, Harry, and Hermione stood to the side and observed. Ron was having trouble convincing Ginny, and Eric turned to Harry and pushed him towards the two. "Go, convince her." Harry was confused, but then Eric pushed him harder, and Harry almost crashed into Ginny. Ginny was surprised to see Harry suddenly and got a little shy. "Hi, Ginny. We are just worried for you, and we made this potion for you yesterday ourselves. Please drink it, I hope it will help you." Harry was imagining Edwina giving him a thumbs up, proud that she had instilled good manners in him. Ginny did not reply for some time and just looked guilty. "Harry, I did a bad thing. Everything is wrong because of me." She had mist in her eyes as Harry panicked on the inside. He just stood there as Ginny laid her forehead on his shoulder and silently cried. After some time, Harry gave her the potion vial, which she drank, and Hermione took her to her room so she could get some rest. Harry turned back only to see the grin on Eric's face. "I'll wipe that off," he growled, and launched small fireballs from his left hand as he chased after Eric, who laughed and dodged easily. Some days passed as Harry had to deal with people calling him the heir of Slytherin and other things, but his friends never stopped defending him. Ron even got into a fight with a second-year boy who was talking shit about Harry. Even Draco helped Harry, as Marcus Flint from his house was calling Harry the heir, and Draco just looked at the troll face and said, "He's not even in Slytherin, troll face. Are you daft?" Draco was not being overtly protective but was implying that someone from his house should be the heir, leading the students to think that he was actually defending his house and increasing the respect the Slytherins had for him. The people affected by the curse were not getting any better, leading Eric to get anxious. One night, he took the diary and went to the Chamber of Secrets. He took Harry with him. "I found this chamber the night we made the potion and this diary too. I think this diary is connected with the attacks." Harry trusted him and just followed him. As they neared the chamber, he asked, "What did you find in the chamber when you first entered?" Eric gestured to the corridor in front. "There was a basilisk here. I helped it and took it to the island." Harry's eyes widened. "That might be the creature attacking the students." Eric shook his head. "No, this is a curse. A basilisk's gaze simply kills or petrifies if viewed indirectly." Eric then put the diary on the ground and opened it. "Come out," he ordered, as a red hand came crawling from the diary, finding a place for support. A head emerged and then the full body. It was red in color, as if flayed skin. The creature found its footing and stared at the two boys with hatred. Then skin emerged on the body of the creature, and a dark smoke enveloped it as a boy of about 16 years of age with black eyes appeared. "You! How dare you!" he said as he bent down towards the diary, and a wand appeared from it, which he took and pointed at the two. The wand was black in color and had runes written in beast blood on it. He had taken the wand from the Room of Lost Things and modified it for his own use by some dark methods. "Harry Potter, it seems that my original self left all his intellect with me to have been bested by a child." Eric and Harry looked at the boy without fear, and Pyrrha also took a protective stance in front of Harry. "So you were the one who was causing all the attacks?" "Why?" Harry was the one to ask as he took a defensive stance with his wand and left palm pointed at the older boy. "Yes. Those Mudbloods were just a means to regain my power. I was merely taking back the magic they stole from the noble-blooded like me. The cat was the first experiment that went right. I have placed a cursed ritual on them that takes away their magic and feeds it to me. There's not much time left before they all die and I become whole again. The boy explained with a smile on his face. Harry looked horrified and Eric was worried. Who are you? Harry asked, at which Tom wrote his name in the air and then jumbled them into I am Lord Voldemort. You think I would keep the name of my muggle father, he sneered. Today you both will die, and that beast will be used as blood and bones for my new form far surpassing my other self. True to his nature, he started with the killing curse at Eric, who used his flame to absorb it. At the same time, Harry cast Expelliarmus and Fire with Pyrrha, which Tom just blocked with a Protego. It seemed that the ritual had allowed him to retain higher strength compared to Canon. Eric then stepped in front and called out to Harry, "Step back, Harry, and just look out for me. I will fight him alone." Hearing this, Tom laughed but had fury in his eyes. You? Fight me? What do you think I've been doing this whole time? I am far stronger now than when I was 16. As if to prove that, he transfigured the ground into spikes that moved towards Eric, who dodged and conjured ice shards to repel the spikes. Eric then commanded his flame to fire toward Tom, as Tom conjured fiend fire to counter the flame. He did not have great control over the fiend fire, but it seemed that the fire itself was an enemy of Eric's fire and charged at it as if they were mortal enemies. The fiend fire was weaker than Eric's flame, but it did buy some time for Tom, who took all the broken stones and bones in the chamber and turned them into dark crystals that shot out toward Eric. Eric waved his wand, turning the crystals to dust, as Tom manipulated all the water in the chamber to move towards Eric, trying to imprison him. You're no student. I'm homeschooled. Eric just used one hand to keep the water at bay and grinned. Chileria Draconis, he yelled, as runes lit up around Tom. He had been planting runes throughout the fight using the dust and transfiguring the ground. Just as the spell was complete, the temperature around Tom lowered, and his movements slowed. Then a serpentine dragon was conjured from Eric's wand as it rushed toward Tom, who created a vortex of black fire to counter it, but it was useless. The dragon coiled around Tom, binding him. He tried fighting but could not move. He roared in fury as his skin turned blue, his breath became shallow, and frost came from every exhale. Eric's fire had also won against the fiend fire, and Eric recalled it. He then moved toward the diary, ignoring Tom, as he took out a basilisk fang from his pouch and stabbed the diary. Tom screamed as blood poured out of the diary. Eric stored the blood in a vial, and Tom disappeared in a flash of light. Harry blinked. Bloody hell! I'll tell Mom you used those words. Grinned Eric. A/N, suggest me the next world guys. And give me power stones, let's climb up the rankings. Chapter 35, Loony No More. Daphne was returning from classes alone as she saw Luna in the corridor, looking at the scenery of the school when she noticed Luna was not wearing any shoes. She approached Luna and stood beside her, connecting to nature. Or is there another story for not wearing shoes today? Luna looked at Daphne and then back to the scenery. There are some students with rackspurts in their ears, they took my shoes. Luna responded. Daphne has learned by now how Luna thinks and internalizes things in her mind. Did they do anything else? Like hurt you or call you names? Daphne asked with narrowed eyes. They call me loony, but I don't think they want to be mean. Luna replied with a dreamy detachment to which Daphne narrowed her eyes. Rackspurts make it hard for some people to think clearly. It's not really their fault. Luna said serenely. Daphne just to Luna by hand. Come with me, she said, and Luna just followed. In the Ravenclaw common room there were some girls chatting. They had a pair of pink shoes by their side. Who wears such ugly shoes? We did her a favor by taking them. One of them spoke. See? They are kind girls, it's just rackspurts in their brains. Luna's voice came from the side as she was with an icy-looking Daphne. The girls frowned, thinking Luna was making fun of them, but then stiffened as they saw how Daphne was looking at them. Eric and Daphne were the most famous in Ravenclaw, as everyone respected and feared them in their house, even older students. "Get up!" Daphne commanded the girls as they stood up. "Who took her shoes? Come forward." Two girls stepped back as one was just looking down. "Daphne, come here," the girl and spoke. "Luna is a friend of me and Eric, don't mess with her again," Daphne said calmly as the other girl nodded. She then looked behind the girl towards the other two, who also nodded like chicken pecking at rice. "Tell your other friends too," Daphne commanded, and left with Luna after she had worn her shoes. The students and Cat that were afflicted by Tom's curse were healed overnight as the rumors and fear in the students also receded. Eric and Harry just went on with their daily schedules, but Eric did notice a fire in Harry's eyes. Harry now thought that Voldemort might have other such artifacts that may assist in his revival, and he wanted to be ready and fight them himself next time. He did not wish to be on the side if a matter involves Voldemort. A meeting was taking place in Dumbledore's office right now, as there were the school board, Minister Fudge, Lucius Malfoy and some Aurors the ministers had brought. "Why won't you tell us what the threat was?" Lucius was frustrated right now. Just as the students healed overnight and the attacks stopped, everyone believed that Dumbledore was the one responsible for exterminating the threat, and they were here to question him. However, no matter who asked, Dumbledore was just answering cryptically, "My students and very capable and brave, I was not involved in its extermination. Although I wished I had known better myself to help them better." Dumbledore sighed in the end. "Is there anything that might endanger the students and you are hiding from us because of personal gains?" the minister asked from the side. He was standing a little behind Lucius. Dumbledore shook his head. "Nothing that I am aware of, Minister." Lucius slammed his walking stick light on the ground, signifying his impatience. "I and the minister deem you no longer capable of protecting the students of the school and demand your resignation this instant." After saying that, Lucius looked at the others, expecting their confirmation. "I disagree. Whatever the threat was, I am certain it was him who stooped it, and he might be hiding it from us for our own safety. This incident proves that the school needs Dumbledore more than ever," one of the board members said. Their words shut the mouth of the minister and Lucius because they made perfect sense, and because the children were healed and healthy again, they had no leverage to accuse Dumbledore of anything right now. Dumbledore was quiet as the people present weighed their interests. He just sat there and ate some candy, even offering some to the people present. Lucius just clenched his fist and turned around, leaving without a word, and the minister just changes his tune that same second and started flattering Dumbledore. "I never doubted your devotion to this school," were the words Lucius heard from the minister towards Dumbledore before the door was shut. As Lucius was walking back, he witnessed Harry and was tricked by the boy into freeing Dobby. Dobby had met Harry in different circumstances and actually helped Harry during the year because of the guidance of Nibbin. Dobby would help Harry if he needed anything, brought him food if he skipped meals, and even got him some supplies for school he needed. The elf had tried to convince Harry to not attend the school as first, but did not do stupid shit when Harry firmly refused. That was the reason Harry knew of Dobby and helped free the house elf. After all the guests were gone, Dumbledore was sitting in his office in contemplation. He had not lied to the people who had visited him earlier and was contemplating calling Harry and Eric for a chat right now. A/N, for some reason it took me long to write this chapter. Where I have some news too. I am thinking God might be the next world. Give me your power stones. Chapter 36, Chat with Dumble. Eric and Harry were on their way to Dumbledore's office, the headmaster having invited them for a chat, and both had an idea what it was about. As they entered, Dumbledore was standing beside his personal library, searching for something. Pyrrha immediately fluttered up to Fawkes, proudly showing off her new look. "My boys, do come in. Would you care for a lemon drop?" Dumbledore asked with a twinkle. Eric accepted the candy and sat down with Harry, both waiting for the old man to start. After settling into his chair, Dumbledore looked at the two boys and began, "I would like to start by apologizing to the two of you. It was because of my inability to connect the dots that you had to put your lives in danger." His voice carried a note of regret, ending in a sad smile. Harry shook his head. Please, Professor, it's not your fault. We stumbled on things by coincidence ourselves. Dumbledore looked at Harry with a kind smile. Could you boys help me with putting the pieces together? I have broken fragments that are not forming a full picture yet. Harry glanced at Eric, who gave a nod of permission, so Harry proceeded to recount their side of the story. He was careful not to mention Eric's powers, they weren't his secrets to tell. You both went through a great deal this year, Dumbledore said thoughtfully after Harry finished. And Eric, you showed great intelligence as well. The headmaster added, giving Eric a nod of genuine respect. After that, they chatted a little longer, touching on lighter matters, the upcoming exams, their summer plans. Eventually, Dumbledore rose and dismissed them gently. As the boys left, Dumbledore remained behind, deep in thought. He walked over to Fawkes and gently stroked his phoenix's head. I have a good feeling about the two. He murmured, a rare smile of quiet relief appearing on his face. Meanwhile, the Hawthorne family were happily welcoming a guest. Please sit, Elder, I hope your trip was comfortable. Simon welcomed Elder Huo in the mansion. Yes, it was comfortable, I am fond of the sea. Elder Huo had covered the route partially via the sea to arrive in Britain. Good, although if you have any important task in the sect, we have methods that can allow you to travel back and forth in a short amount of time. Simon offered to ease the elder if he had any worries. Elder Huo just laughed at that. I do not really take any responsibilities in the sect anyway, and I have sect master to take care of things for me there. The kindly old elder is as sly as ever. He was also given the bloodline fruit and had regained much of his energy and can protect the section, the elder continued. Edwina smiles at that. Eric will be happy to see you when he returned home after his semester ends, he is always finding new things to write to you about. The three chatted as Eric was in for a surprise when he would return home. Eric looked at Daphne in concern as they were in History of Magic class. She had dark circles under her eyes and was almost dozing off. Can you tell me what you are up to? I might be able to help, he said to the girl. Daphne was spending a lot of time in the roar, trying to do something. She would skip lunch and sleep. Eric had an idea it was about her sister but did not mention it as he knew it would be counterproductive. He just tried to be there so she would tell him herself when she would be comfortable. Daphne would just brush these questions aside and try to reassure Eric that she was just studying for the exams. The exams were approaching as Eric and Harry were in the Forbidden Forest. Harry would come here with Pyrrha from time to time so she could play with Norberta, as it seems Pyrrha's flame control would increase the more time she would spend with Norberta. Let's explore the forest from up high, Harry suggested to Eric as they raised an eyebrow. Why not? Eric shrugged as he approached Norberta. Can you give us a tour of the forest? Eric asked the dragon, who was now the size of adult dragons. Norberta just lowered her body so the boys could climb on. The boys happily hopped on her back at that. Norberta flapped her wings as they were propelled to the sky at great speed. Harry had a big smile on his face as the boys opened their arms and looked at the scenery below them passing by at great speed. The boys then saw the centaur village as the dragon lowered itself to give them a better view. They saw the blonde-haired centaur with some other centaurs and a thestral as Eric told the dragon to land near them. The centaur trip were acquainted with Norberta, as missing a giant dragon in their forest would just be ignorant, and the centaur tribe also had a good relationship with her. Firenze and the group were surprised to see humans riding on top of her and got on guard, but then relaxed as they recognized the children. Firenze was with Violian, the centaur from Nightshade Island, and the thestral he had named Corvus. As the boys dismounted the dragon and approached the centaurs, Firenze smiles and greeted them both as Violian bowed to Eric. Corvus nuzzled up to the boys as the thestral, salamander and dragon went to the side and played among each other. Eric was aware of the arrival of Violian in the great forest and looking forwards to the changes he would bring. I am happy to see you healthy, my lord, Violian said to Eric, who just smiled. I would love to invite you both to the village, but there are still some in the village that would oppose the entry of humans. Firenze said as Violian frowned from the side. The boys did not mind and just opted to cat with the centaurs at the lakeside. A/N, God will be the next world. Chapter 37, Shadow Peak Sanctum. Returning from school, Eric and Harry were welcomed warmly by their family, and Eric was surprised to see Elder Huo standing with his parents, waiting for him. Eric hugged all three of them in turn, and they chatted all the way about how the school year had gone during the car ride. They had to drop Harry at the Dursleys for now. In this version of events, the Dursleys did not encourage Dudley into bullying Harry, so the two cousins actually had a better relationship, and Harry wanted to keep fostering it. Once Harry was dropped off, the Hawthorne family went straight back to their castle. It was already evening, and they decided to have dinner by the lake. The family talked easily, catching up on things while the sun dipped behind the hills. "This makes all other dark magic look like the light of the sun," Elder Huo remarked, holding the vial of blood Eric had collected after stabbing Tom's diary. The dark liquid seemed to pulse faintly under the lantern light. "Why do you always have to jump straight into every trouble that comes your way?" Edwina admonished Eric, her tone carrying both worry and exasperation. Simon, seated beside her, simply sipped his tea without comment, the faintest smirk playing on his lips. Eric offered his mother reassurance, listening to her the entire time without interruption. She finally stopped after a while, knowing her son's capabilities but unable to shake her protective instincts. "You'll have to sleep on the couch tonight," she said suddenly to Simon. Simon blinked, looking around as if to ask, "Why am I catching strays here?" The following day, Eric was with Thimril in the room of the portly statues, discussing possible destinations to explore. "This one leads to Nepal, to the Shadow Peak Sanctum," Thimril explained, gesturing toward a sleek Black Panther statue. "It is the best option if you wish to connect with spirits of the world." "Thank you," Eric said sincerely, before dashing off to find his family. They were in the garden having tea. A dragon curled lazily in the grass while a pair of thestrals drank from a trough nearby. Eric arrived and stopped in front of them. "We're going to Nepal," he announced to the three. No one questioned it, they were long used to Eric's sudden ideas. Simon did, however, flick him on the forehead before rising to go and pack. Within the hour, they were in the main hall, speaking with Thimril about what to expect once they arrived. Then, placing their hands on the panther statue, they spoke the password in unison. In an instant, they vanished. They reappeared in a vast hall made of smooth black stone. The space was cool and faintly lit, with little floating dots floating around the room. From the shadows, a calm and velvety voice spoke. "Welcome to the Shadow Peak Sanctum. I am Nixthi." A large black panther emerged from the darkness, her violet eyes glowing softly. Edwina was instantly smitten. She ran forward and embraced the massive feline without hesitation, running her hands through the glossy black fur. "You are so cute," she said warmly. "Thank you, my lady," Nixthi replied in a smooth and soft voice. She seemed a little bit of the shy type. "Could you show us around and introduce us to the sanctum?" Simon asked politely, smiling. Nixthi inclined her head and led them through the sanctum hall. She explained that it was built in the style of a domed hemispherical stupa, its black stones chosen to align with the mountain's ley lines. The pond at the center reflected the hall ceiling, which had constellations etched in silver thread. Nixthi revealed herself to be a half-demon spirit of darkness, bound to the sanctum as its eternal protector. Outside the hall, the Shadow Peak Sanctum stretched across the entire mountain. Students and monks trained in the courtyards, though the Hawthorns decided to meet them the next day out of courtesy. "Will they know how to speak English?" Simo asked, to which Nixthi nodded her here. "I suggested English as one the subjects just like Shenlian did in the sect in China." For the rest of the day, they explored the central hall and spoke with Nixthi, learning about the history of the mountain. "What is the difference between spirits and demons?" Eric asked. "We are both spiritual beings, but demons are more darker spirits and are more intelligent even at a lower strength. Spirits gain intelligence with time and as they grow stronger," Nixthi explained. The next day, The senior monks of the Shadow Peak Sanctum were buzzing with excitement. Word had spread quickly today they would meet the Protector herself. For most, this was a once-in-a-lifetime honor. Only the Sanctum Master, upon election, was granted regular counsel with Nixthi. According to tradition, all senior monks were bonded to small animal spirits, tiny glowing fish, translucent rabbits, or spectral birds that floated at their sides. The Sanctum Master's own companion was a great silver-furred wolf, the largest spirit in the room. It was said that simply being in the Protector's presence could strengthen a spirit, allowing it to remain in the physical world for far longer. The Master raised his hand, and silence fell over the chamber. "I understand this is a monumental opportunity," he said. "But refrain from speaking to the Protector unless she speaks to you first. Your spirits will benefit simply from being near her." From the darkest corner of the room, two violet eyes opened. At once, the bonded spirits stirred, drifting toward the gaze as though drawn by an unseen current. "It is good to see the sanctum thriving," Nixthi's voice filled the room, low and resonant. The smaller spirits curled around her, resting against her sleek form. "Some guests from Britain have arrived to visit the sanctum," she continued. "They are important to me. Treat them as you would treat me." "We will, Protector," the Sanctum Master replied at once, bowing low. Nixthi dipped her head, nuzzled a rabbit spirit, and then retreated back into the shadows. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, one by one, some of the bonded spirits began to glow brightly before flowing back into the chests of their bonded monks. "Such little time with the Protector, and they've already grown stronger," one monk said with quiet joy. The Master allowed himself a small smile. "Prepare the sanctum for the arrival of our guests." He rose, his silver wolf padding silently at his side. "A/N, you got stones? Hand 'em over, pipsqueak." Chapter 38, The Sanctum and the Toad. The next day, the Hawthorne family were welcomed by the sanctum with open arms as the senior members had prepared a welcoming party for them. Simon, Edwina, and the Sanctum Master were at the head of the table as Eric mingled with some disciples, while Elder Huo was chatting with some monks. "Thank you for the warm welcome, you have a beautiful sanctum," Simon said to the Sanctum Master. The Master smiled and replied, "This sanctum is a blessing from the Protector, and any friend of hers is a friend to us." After the party, some monks showed the sect to the family. The sanctum was almost ethereal as the disciples trained with their contracted spirits. The senior members and disciples had spirits in the form of small animals, while the junior disciples had spirits that were just floating orbs of different colors. They were then led to a building made of white marble with runes all over it. As they entered, they saw that the interior was covered with green, waist-high mist, and in the middle stood a veil. This is the dimensional veil, a connection to the unreality where all spirits reside. This is where the disciples pray to the spirits and make contracts with them. The Hawthorne family were intrigued. As they came closer to the veil, they saw an altar in front of it, where an 11-year-old boy was praying with a monk by his side. They stood beside the monk already present and just nodded in greeting, not wanting to disturb the process. After 10 minutes, Nixthar arrived and stood beside Edwina. The monks were surprised at first but then bowed deeply to her, to which she simply looked at them and nodded. As if delighted by Nixthar's presence, the veil stirred, and a brown mouse stepped out, curiously moving toward the disciple. The monks widened their eyes but said nothing. The disciple at the altar opened his eyes after some time and was delighted to see the mouse looking at him curiously. He reached out his hand, and the mouse did not move, accepting the touch. A connection was formed. The boy jumped in joy with the mouse in his arms, then turned to his master but paused as he saw the audience around him had grown. He bowed to Nixthar first, surprised by her. "Ours greets the Protector." Nixthar approached the boy as the rat climbed onto her. "Greetings, young one. Take care of your little friend from now on," she said with a smile. Ours then greeted his master with great joy on his face. The rat returned to his arms. "Master, thank you for your guidance. His master smiled happily and patted his head. As they were leaving, Eric approached the boy and chatted with him. "Congratulations, I'm Eric, nice to meet you." Eric introduced himself, and Ars did the same. Ars seemed cheerful and friendly, someone Eric liked. The mouse dissipated into motes of light and entered Ars's chest, as spirits could not remain in the physical world for long periods. The family were now integrated into the sanctum, and Eric had made a new friend. On the second day of their stay, the family had to go to a ministry gathering as nobles, so they were in their mansion, getting ready. Eric and Simon wore black suits with golden embroidery, and Edwina wore a green dress, all gifts from the sect in China. Elder Huo was dressed in white robes, he would also be attending as an introduction into the family. In the manner of a noble house, a party was taking place with most noble families and high-ranking ministry officials present, including the Minister of Magic. During the party, 4 people entered, attracting the attention of many lords and ladies as the minister rushed to greet Simon. "I was waiting for your arrival to add some much-needed life to the party," the minister said quietly, ensuring no one else heard. Simon chuckled and greeted the minister, while the family mingled. Eric went to greet the Greengrass sisters, with Draco approaching soon after. Daphne was still a little distant toward Eric and seemed sleep-deprived. Astoria was much more cheerful and greeted the boys eagerly, asking many questions as she would be joining Hogwarts this year. "Is it true that there are moving stairs and rooms that eat people in Hogwarts?" Astoria asked. Eric grinned. "Yes, there are moving stairs that lead you to be eaten by student eating rooms. But if you play pranks on students, it won't affect you." Astoria was scared at first but smiled in the end. "I will play lots of pranks then." Daphne huffed and hit Eric on the back of the head, as Draco laughed. "Don't worry if you're in Slytherin, I won't let anyone touch you," Draco added. As the party went on, Eric noticed a pink toad talking to his father. He rubbed his eyes and leaned toward Draco. "Is that a talking pink toad, or just a monstrosity?" Draco looked and, after a pause, answered, "Yes." Eric then approached Simon, with Draco following. "There are many true wizards and witches you can employ too. I will send you a ministry-vetted list tomorrow for administrative tasks in your ventures," the toad was blabbering toward Simon, who merely nodded while continuing his conversation with Lucius and Ignatius. The toad perhaps did not notice the 3 men treating her like air. Even Lucius ignored her. He knew with the nonsense she was spouting, acknowledging her would not be in his interest. "Dad, can I invite Draco for?" Eric began, but the toad interrupted. "This is not the time, child. Go play with your friends." The men turned toward her, Simon narrowing his eyes. "Silence," he said evenly to Dolores, who froze. He then turned back to Eric and gestured for him to continue with a smile. "Yes. I was asking if I can invite Draco with me to visit the sect someday." Simon nodded, seeing no problem with that. Even if Draco told his parents about their connections in China, it would only raise their reputation. "I am the undersecretary to the Minister of Magic. How could you speak to me like that?" Umbridge blurted, still in shock. Simon glanced at her from the corner of his eye. "At least have the courtesy not to disturb me when I am talking to my son. And do not presume to tell me how to run my business. Leave now." Umbridge was shaking at this point. The minister, who had approached and overheard the last part, went pale and said, "Forgive me, Lord Hawthorne, I need to borrow Madame Umbridge for a moment." Simon simply shrugged, as the kids and men carried on as if nothing had happened, while the minister led the toad away, whispering furiously in her ear. A/N, Stones. Chapter 39, of Potions, Politics, and Poor Decisions. Simon and his circle mostly shrugged off the commotion. Dolores, to them, wasn't worth more than a raised eyebrow. The minister, however, was alarmed. "Please just enjoy the party, as this is not the time for official business, important as it surely is." He was politely telling her to chill. Dolores was still shaken but just nodded in the end as she saw Elder Huo to the side talking to some very important Podiwaners. She fixed her posture and approached the elder. "Forgive the interruption, but may I sit with you scholars for an enlightening conversation?" She was capable of being polite at the beginning, at least. The people present did not mind, as one lady said, "Yes, please, we were just discussing some improvements in the wolfsbane potion this gentleman has devised." She gestured towards Elder Huo at the end. Dolores frowned at that. True improvement would be to put down the beasts for good. The removal of the undesirable is essential for a healthy society, after all. The more she spoke, the more the faces of people around her fell, as the lady who had welcomed her was looking around at the other members in apology, feeling truly guilty. "I consider lycanthropy as an affliction to be sympathized with and have stated so in my book Fire and Potions. But it seems the British ministry does not agree with my writing and openly mocks it," Elder Huo said as Dolores deepened her frown at first but then stood in shock. To increase the standing of Elder Huo in British society, he had released his book, and it was a hit among British society and in the Podiwaner circles. Even the ministry had tried to contact him to bring him to their side because of the reverence some of the most respected Podiwaners gave to Elder Huo because of the book. "Am I talking to Sir Huo Yan?" Dolores did not back down as she used the elder's full name as the author. "Yes," was the simple reply. "And which family are you associated with?" she asked arrogantly, as a voice came from behind. "Mine." The voice brought chills down her spine as Simon was standing behind her, calm and icy. Elder Huo then turned to Simon. "I believe it is time, my old bones are tired." Simon nodded at the elder with a smile. The minister had overheard the exchange and dragged Dolores away again before she could start screeching. As the Hawthorne family left, the minister was in despair, as his two goals in the party were to make connections with the Hawthorns and with Elder Huo, who were both making waves. To add to his despair, the next day the Daily Prophet had a headline that said, "Is the Undersecretary daft?" His letters with orders to bury this news mysteriously never reached the people in charge, and even more mysteriously, a new and righteous upstart was given the first page for some reason. It seems the new and highly respected potion master that has made waves in Britain is the new member of the Hawthorne family. And during a party, the dear Undersecretary of the Minister of Magic managed to antagonize the whole family. First interrupting the young genius Eric Hawthorne, who defeated a troll in his first year and has come out with the highest grades in his year. His teachers quote him to be a prodigy only seen in 100 years, and later, in the spirit of consistency, she managed to antagonize Elder Huo Yan, a respected member of an ancient and renowned Chinese sect whose presence has ignited a fire in the British potion market. Let us pray for our collective future she does not take part in any more gatherings involving important people. I wonder what the minister's thoughts on the events are, *. The article was sarcastic and full of jabs, as well as giving juicy and latest news, making it appealing to most of the magical population. Even the purebloods were angry, as having a gifted Podiwaner like Elder Huo on their bad side was not on their agenda. The article also contained direct quotes from Dolores. Simon threw away the letter requesting a meeting from the minister and carried on in Nepal, learning new methods of potion making and spells from the sanctum alongside Elder Huo. Eric was working on his own project as he carved some wood with Ars and his spirit by his side. He was not using any common wood but Rowan wood he had taken from the island. "You are good at it, and it looks like my spirit too." Ars admired the sculpting as the little mouse also climbed on his shoulder, as the sculpture looked like it. Eric smiled smugly but then asked, "Why don't you name these spirits?" Ars thought for a moment and replied, "My master told me it is dangerous to name spirits if they don't have physical bodies. And creating physical bodies for spirits requires very rare materials." Eric hummed and continued his work as Ars's spirit dissipated, and only he and Eric were left to chat and play. A/N, give me power stones. Chapter 40, When Would Learn to Breathe. Harry had just returned from visiting the Weasleys for 2 days, they had departed for their trip to Egypt the day he returned. As he came down from his room, yawning with Pyrrha at his side, he smelled food being prepared. He was being treated much better compared to when he was a child, and the change occurred as soon as Eric appeared. He knew it was related to Eric but did not think more of that. As he neared the dinner table he saw that Vernon had finished his food. Harry never ate with Vernon, and because Vernon had to go to work early he would eat food earliest, so he did not have to wait long either. Every time Petunia and Vernon saw Harry after their chat with Simon, they would feel a phantom pain of being burned every time they would have negative thoughts about Harry. This actually gave Petunia time to think, and she was disgusted with herself because of her behavior. She never had the time for these thoughts before because she was not the one feeling pain. Vernon, however, would just treat Harry like air and did not even look at him. He had trained himself to not even acknowledge Harry. As Vernon left for work, Dudley came down the stairs and sat on the dinner table, waiting for his food. Dudley treated Harry like a roommate at first when they would bump into each other, but now be considered him a friend, as Harry would show Dudley magical objects and he was fascinated by them. Harry, Dudley, and Petunia had food as the boys chatted and made plans to play outside. It was Harry's birthday the day before and he was given a bracelet by Eric. It was a magical focus that was not as good as his wand, but it allowed him to perform magic outside school. Harry then went to his room to get some food for Pyrrha, as Vernon had forbidden to give the beast any food. He would get food for her by giving some money to Dobby, who would bring food for her every day. "You are always going to different countries, can you bring to me one sometime?" Dudley asked Harry as they were just roaming around the park. Pyrrha looked like a dog to Muggles because of a charm. Harry, though, for a moment I will ask Uncle Simon about it. Dudley then looked around. "Can I at least get a pet like Pyrrha?" Harry laughed. "How are you going to defend yourself when she blows fire at you in her sleep? Pyrrha did that a lot when she was little." Pyrrha gave a side eye to Harry at his words and huffed, looking away. Looking at Dudley's sad face, Harry sighed. "I can get you a computer. You said you wanted to learn coding, right?" Dudley looked up at that. "Computers are very expensive, Harry. Dad told me it would take months to save up for one." Dudley stopped walking and said, to which Harry shrugged, "I have enough money for that, and it is increasing every day too. Uncle Simon owns a computer company, so it won't be too expensive for me." Dudley was happy at that. "Today's ice cream is on me." He cheered as the boys met up with their other friends. Eric was in the Centaur tribe of the Nightshade Island right now, looking at a patch of Vitalis blooms. He had planted 2 of them here and they have grown into a patch. The centaurs tend to them and use them in healing potions or rituals. "Do I need anything else?" he asked Orion, who was inspecting the rat-shaped wooden figure Eric had made. Orion looked at the sky and hummed to himself for a moment. "We need a magical core for this. An Antipodean opal eye heartstring should suffice, and some runes. The goblins should be able to scribe them, and the Vitalis bloom petal to grant life energy." Eric nodded and thanked Orion. He then went to the goblin village for integration of the dragon heartstring and the runes. After all his work was done, he went back to the sanctum, searching for Ark, whom he found in the garden tending to some plants. "Come with me," he said as they started dragging the boy with him. By now he knew Eric's personality, so he just went limp and let himself be dragged. After they reached an isolated area, Eric presented him with a wooden sculpture of a rat with silver runes on it. Ark took it in his hand. "Thank you, it's pretty." He smiled at Eric, who just waved his hand. "It's much more than that. Summon your spirit." Ark raised an eyebrow and did as was told. He raised his palm and concentrated as a rat appeared in his hand, sniffing around and climbing on his shoulder. "Give the sculpture to the spirit," Eric told Ars, who did as was told. Ark placed the spirit on the ground first, and then gave it the sculpture. The spirit went near it and held it in its paws. Is then started to dissipate in motes of light and entered the sculptures as Ars gasped in shock. "Is this?" Ars just stammered in the end, unable to complete his sentence, but Eric just smiled and nodded. Ars gasped. "You are kidnapping my spirit," he suddenly said as he balled his fists and got into a fighting stance. Eric started waving his hands. "No, dumbass, I made a body for her," he said as he remembered something and placed a silver petal on the glowing sculpture. "I knew that, I just wanted to see you panicked," Ars said as he nodded in satisfaction. Eric just sighed and observed the process happening in front of him. After some time a brown rat appeared in front of them, climbing of Ars's shoulder and sniffing around. Eric pumped his fist and shouted success, now give him a name. He nudged Ark. Ark though for a moment and looked at the rat. I name you Grub, he said as the rat glowed for a second and curled up, going to sleep. A/N, what spirits should the family get? Give me power stones or I will keep the next chapter hostage. Please give reviews to the novel. Chapter 41, From God's Hand to Mortal Bond. The Sanctum Master had heard the news of what Eric did for Ars and he was happy beyond belief, thanking Eric profusely. Your family has been a blessing to our sanctum, we have gained immeasurable knowledge and access to resources because of you and now you have done a great favor to us, I do not have words to express my gratitude. Eric was a little overwhelmed at that as he just smiled. I just did it for my new friend, and we have learned from the sanctum as well, I thank you for your hospitality and care as well. Hearing this the old man gave a laugh, ruffling Eric's hair. The wolf by his side also nuzzled Eric a little. Eric noticed that the wolf also has a physical body as he patted its head. The Sanctum Master noticed the exchange. Her body is a gift from the Protector, as a reward for when I defeated a powerful dark wizard. The man explained. When a spirit connected with you gets a body you share in the gift as it increases your own lifespan by a great margin and naming further connects you at a fundamental level, increasing both life and magical prowess by a significant margin. Eric listened with attention as the man continued. The gift you gave Ars is something that will be carried for generations, so please, if you are ever in need of anything please don't hesitate as I will be there for your family. The old man finished with a promise by placing a hand on his chest, showing sincerity. After his meeting with the Sanctum Master Eric joined his family as the Sanctum Hall with Nixthar also present. You will be connecting with your spirits today, please follow me. Nixthar said as she started walking and the family followed. She then led them to the veil where spirits are summoned. This vial is not only connected to the unreality but also the divine, so think of your patron gods as you pray. She stepped to the side after saying that as Simon stepped forward first. Simon sat on the altar in a meditative stance and closed his eyes. As his vision darkened he focused on the vision of Makara he had when he first received his blessing. His vision brightened as the sea god appeared in front of him in his glory. He had various animal parts like elephant trunk, crocodile jaws, peacock tail, lion feet, and a body so massive that space could not seem to be able to contain it. Simon just watched in silence for some time, comprehending the form in front of him and failing as a chuckle was heard in the realm as if from everywhere. You are not strong enough yet, son. The voice had an echo to it and a soothing tone. Simon smiled and just focused on the eyes of the being in front of him. Forgive me, he bowed. There is nothing to forgive, I just wished to speak with you. There is no need to be so formal. Makara dismissed his worries. As Simon looked in front of him, a wolf that was big enough to reach his chest with midnight grey fur with streaks and blue lightning-like patterns appeared in front of him, forming an instant connection. The storm wolf seems to have chosen you. Makara explained and blessed the wolf as Simon rubbed the wolf's head. Simon looked at the god again as the wolf just sat down in front of him. Thank you, he said sincerely, to which Makara just laughed softly. He chose you, I did nothing. Come sit and tell me about yourself. Image of the wolf. Simon just laughed and sat on the ground with the god as he talked about his family with a gentle smile on his face, as Makara just listened. In the real world, Simon opened his eyes as the wolf appeared from the veil and they greeted each other like old friends. Simon walked towards his family as Edwina and Eric also greeted the wolf with affection as the newest part of the family. As you both have the same patron gods, please step forward together. Nixthar told Edwina and Eric as both nodded and went forward together, hand in hand. They both then sat together and prayed as they were also transported to the Vasuki's realm, as the goddess stood with Ilaria at her side. Eric smiled and gave both of them a hug, however Edwina was a little shy knowing Vasuki is a literal god until Vasuki also smiled at her and hugged her. The 3 women and 1 boy sat and ate as Vasuki talked to Edwina about her life and Ilaria pampered Eric. Edwina attracted a small two-tailed fox. One of its tail was green in color while the other was silver, and Eric attracted a 1-meter-long snake with blue scales at the top and pitch black at the stomach area. Image of the fox. Image of the snake. The fox is the spirit of poison and healing while the snake is the spirit of day and night. They both will be worthy companions for you. Vasuki smiled, giving both spirits her blessings. Stay a little while longer as you are strong enough for a little more time, and not much time will pass in the material world. Vasuki urged both of them as she was enjoying her conversation with Edwina, and Ilaria was holding Eric like her life depended on it. They both returned as their spirits appeared as well. The family then celebrated with the whole sanctum. Eric even brought Harry for the night of celebration. A/N, give me stones or I will not let the next chapter out of my basement. I was just thinking. How about Tenchera as the third world? Chapter 42, Silver Eyes. Harry entered his house in the evening, returning from taking Pyrrha on a walk, when he saw Marge Dursley eating and drinking with Vernon and Petunia. Marge noticed Harry's return and ordered the boy to serve her wine. The other Dursleys tensed at the words, but then relaxed when Harry simply did as told and turned to go to his room. Where are your manners, boy? Make some snacks for us, Marge demanded as Harry was about to reach the stairs. Harry turned around and narrowed his eyes, but Petunia hurriedly spoke, there is no need for that, I will make us something tasty. Just as Petunia was about to get up, Marge interjected, let him do it. He is enjoying your kindness all these years, what is the harm in doing some work? His good-for-nothing father would have fared better if those values were instilled in him from a young age. Petunia looked around, not knowing what to do, panicking on the inside. It's okay, Aunt. Please just sit, Harry said simply as Pyrrha growled beside him. It's the last day, I'll just endure it, thought Harry as he went to prepare some Scotch eggs. All this time Vernon did not acknowledge a single thing or make any comment. It was when Harry was serving the food that Marge's voice cut through the clink of cutlery. Bad blood. That's what your mother had. Passed it right down to you. Harry froze. He didn't hear the rest, the words didn't matter. Something in him snapped. The annoyance he'd been holding back all evening flared white hot, and his mind blanked, his eyes shone silver as they glared at Marge. Marge clutched her head and opened her mouth as if to scream, but no sound came out. Petunia and Vernon, alarmed, moved back, getting away from the commotion, as black sludge oozed from Marge's ears and nose. Maggots spilled from her mouth as she choked on them. She fell from her chair and started convulsing, staring at the ceiling. The maggots crawled back into her mouth, and when she could speak again, she began sobbing and muttering apologies to the sky, crying and promising to be better before passing out. Vernon and Petunia stood in the corner, shivering, as Harry looked at them after some time. His fury was gone, replaced by an expression of guilt. He looked around, stepped back until his back touched the wall, then looked again at the woman on the ground. He ran up to his room and began packing. Pyrrha followed, trying to comfort him. When he came back down, Vernon was tending to Marge, and Petunia approached him cautiously. Is she going to be okay? Please heal her. She didn't demand or shout, but pleaded. I don't know. I'll send someone with healing potions for her. I need to go now. He moved past her and stepped outside, Pyrrha following. On the street, trying to calm himself, Harry was startled by a large black dog. He stumbled back, sticking out his wand arm to break his fall. His wand pointed toward the street. He looked back, but the dog was gone. Uncle Simon would have berated me for that reaction, he muttered, chuckling as Pyrrha nudged him. Are you just going to laugh, or get in? Came a voice from behind him. Welcome to the night bus, the young man said as Harry turned to him. Sirius was happy to see his godson and worried that he seemed in trouble, but he could do nothing at the moment. He just wanted to see his face. As he walked in the direction of Hogwarts, he heard a voice from behind him. Stalking your prey, hey! Simon was in the Hawthorne mansion when he felt a ping from his ring, a signal for help from the Dursleys. He had given them a parchment, telling them to tear it if Harry was in danger. He got up and operated straight to the Dursley house, where he saw Harry exiting in a hurry. Simon chose to observe for now, knowing Harry could take care of himself. He noticed the dog stalking Harry, and his improved senses told him it was an animagus. He followed the dog and called out, prompting it to stop. Sirius turned and saw a wizard with a sword. He growled and crouched into a pouncing stance. Simon scoffed and waved his hand, restraining Sirius in a single move as he looked into his eyes. Simon used legilimency on Sirius, ripping through his shields. After some time, he raised an eyebrow. "Well, that changes things. I came here to protect Harry, and it seems you care for him as well. Come with me, and I'll help you and introduce you to him." Simon offered directly, knowing this was the best way to communicate with Sirius, who turned back into his human form. "Why?" he asked. "He's a friend of my son, and I care for the boy too," Simon replied simply. "I need to do something. I need revenge first. As long as he's out there, Harry won't be safe," Sirius said, stepping back. "And what are you going to do? Barge into Hogwarts? Kill the only man who can prove you're innocent?" Simon asked. Sirius didn't reply. "He's the reason they're dead." "Fuck my innocence, I'll kill the bastard first," Sirius said. Simon sighed and looked up. "I never said I'd stop you, but there are more logical ways." Sirius exhaled, looked down, then agreed to accompany Simon. Both men went back to the Hawthorne mansion, where Simon called Nibbin and instructed him to make Sirius presentable. Simon then called for Edwina and Eric and explained the situation. "Is Harry okay? Didn't you bring him back as well?" Edwina asked. "He needs time for himself," Simon reasoned. "Did you help the woman?" Edwina was referring to Marge. Simon just nodded. "I gave her a healing potion. She'll try to do better from now on." He shrugged. "The rat ran away last week," Eric interjected. His parents turned to him in shock. Sirius, who had just returned after a bath and change of clothes, was also shocked and began stammering as if malfunctioning. Pyrrha was actually hostile to the rat most of the time, and when Harry was at the Weasleys' house, it just ran away. Ron was sad, but I pointed out that rats don't really live that long and it might have just passed away. Ron accepted it in the end. Sirius sat on the sofa, listening to every word, then sighed. "What should we do?" he asked, looking at Simon. "How about you focus on protecting Harry? Is revenge for the dead more dear to you than their own blood, whom they died protecting?" Edwina reasoned. Sirius slumped for a bit, thinking, then looked up with determination. "You're right. Please help me meet him. A/N, please review the novel, guys, and thank you for those who already have. Your next chapter is with me, and if you want it delivered to you safely, give me all the power stone you have." Chapter 43, An Unconventional Cure. The spirits of the Hawthorne family were given bodies forged with dragon steel skeletons and etched with golden runes by the goblins of the island. Simon's wolf, named Fokran, carried a core gifted by Thimril. The fox, Sylvena, held a core made from a Vitalis bloom petal fused with a basilisk fang. The snake, Chea, bore a core of moonlight essence intertwined with Nagavriksha wood. Meanwhile, Sirius recovered faster than anyone expected. Simon had given him a set of restorative potions, and within a week, Sirius was healthier than he had been in years. The man himself was shocked. Along with his health, he received new clothes and a custom wand in wood with the core of a moonstag's hair. Wands couldn't simply be made from any material, even if custom made, but these materials resonated perfectly with Sirius. His focus, his drive, his very identity had narrowed down to a single truth: protecting Harry above all else. Though he despised Grimmauld Place, Sirius set about putting the old Black estate in order. He wanted Harry to one day live with him, and for that, the house had to be presentable. For the rest of the summer, the Hawthorns often traveled to Nepal. Eric practically stayed there full-time, exploring the region with Elder Huo. They spent days studying plants and magical beasts. Though Elder Huo never bound himself to a spirit, Nixthar aided him in refining his flame, granting it spiritual depth. Eric regretted that he will not be able to speak with Ars in person for some time, but he made sure the boy had ways to contact him. Dune, now carrying a space blessing from a spirit, could cross nations with ease, faster than ever. She was more than happy to act as their messenger. At that moment, Harry was resting in his room at the Leaky Cauldron, enjoying the rare freedom it afforded. A knock came at his window, and he turned to see Dune. "Hello, girl. Thanks for the letter." He let her in, gave her a treat, and watched her trot off to play with Pyrrha. The note was short, written in Eric's hand: "If you're done brooding, come to my house." Harry chuckled. He flew over with Pyrrha and Dune, emerging in the Hawthorn Mansion's parlor where the family sat having tea. He smiled and greeted them before settling next to Eric. "Are you feeling better now?" Edwina asked with a trace of worry. Harry nodded. "I've had some time to think. And Uncle Simon wrote me, he said she's fine. So, yeah. I'm better." Edwina returned the smile before Simon spoke up. "You've heard about Sirius Black by now, haven't you?" Harry's fists clenched as he nodded. "Mr. Weasley told me." Simon sighed and carefully explained the real story. Harry listened in stunned silence. "He's here?" he asked at last. Simon nodded, and Sirius entered the room, looking uncharacteristically nervous. The two stared at each other for a long moment, until the rest of the family quietly left, giving them space. Later, Harry found Eric sitting with Dune and Chea. "So?" Eric asked. Harry took a breath. "There are only 3 days until school starts. Can I spend them with Sirius on the island?" Eric shrugged. "Why not? It's not a big deal." So Harry and Sirius flew to the island together. Sirius froze at the sight before him. "We are nothing compared to them," he muttered, thinking of his own house. The Blacks seemed diminished in comparison to the Hawthorns. The next day, Harry and Sirius visited the centaurs and goblins. Sirius, never one to stay idle, asked Thimril for training. The guardian spirit regarded him with a rare grin before agreeing. The Hawthorns, Sirius, and Harry were at the train station as Eric and Harry bid farewell to those they cared about. Harry and Eric then met up with Daphne, Luna, and Ron. Draco was with them as well, and Astoria, who would be joining Hogwarts this year. Daphne seemed sleep-deprived, which was very concerning to Eric, as he had already given her some moonblood resin potions. She should have been basically immune to most diseases and even able to go long periods without sleep. Eric resolved that he would be getting answers from her this time. They had to separate from Astoria when they reached their destination since she would be going via the boats. Eric did notice, however, that she was much healthier than before. As the group reached the school gates, Eric took Daphne's hand and separated from the others. "What are you doing?" Daphne asked as they reached a secluded place. "I have restrained myself and shown patience about whatever you've been going through, thinking one day you'd trust me enough to tell me. But it seems I was wrong, so I'll ask you directly, what happened?" Eric said all of it in one breath and just stood there. Daphne looked down in guilt as she bit her lip. She then looked up at him and sighed. "There is a blood curse that runs in my family. And Astoria has been suffering from it all her life. One day, when I was researching in the Room of Requirement, I found a way to cure her." After she said that, she stepped forward and held Eric's shoulders as she spoke more seriously. "Do not tell her. I told her it was cured by some potion I gave her. But I found a way to transfer the curse." Eric's eyes went wide at that last part as he took a step back. "Transferred? Why?" You could have asked me for help. My mum could have cured her long ago. We knew something was wrong for a long time. Daphne listened to Eric's words and just shook her head. We asked some very powerful healers for help, but just as any of them seemed to get close to a cure, they suffered very cruel ends. That's why we stopped asking for cures and just looked for ways of containment. And, it's not that bad for me. She stepped toward him as she said the last part. The potions you gave me are great. I don't feel that bad anyway. The curse isn't as effective on me as it was on her. Please, just don't tell anyone about this. My parents don't know, and Astoria would never forgive herself if she knew what I did. Eric looked at the fragile state Daphne was in and hugged her. He then sighed and said, I won't tell anyone, and I have a way to not just cure the curse, but even make you stronger. He broke the hug as he said it. Daphne shook her head. No, you'll get hurt. Eric just grinned. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. A/N, a little bit of drama, all those emotions are for pussies though. All I want are your power stones, as long as I don't get all of them. The next chapter will stay in the basement, begging to be let out. Chapter 44, Ashes and Ascension. The sorting ceremony went by as it did every year, and Astoria was placed into Slytherin. Now it was time for Dumbledore's speech. He first welcomed the new students and continued. As you will all be aware, after their search of the train, our school is presently playing host to some of the Dementors of Azkaban, who are here on Ministry of Magic business. He said it while concealing his anger. Eric and the group had noticed the Dementors, but this time they didn't come near them, as Eric had told Chea to keep them away. And Professor Lockhart will not be continuing his teachings as the defense against the dark arts professor. He paused briefly. Lockhart was dead, killed by a dark wizard who had taken revenge for one of his pet vampires. Lockhart had not actually killed the creature, only taken credit for it, but the wizard had not cared about the distinction. On a happier note, we will be welcoming our new teachers. First, Professor Lupin, who has kindly consented to fill the post of defense against the dark arts teacher. And second, our very own Rubeus Hagrid, who will be taking on the post of care of magical creatures teacher. The students cheered at that, most of all Harry's group and Eric's. As the feast went on, Luna kept glancing at Daphne with worry. Eric noticed but only smiled, leaning close to whisper in her ear, I'll take care of it. Luna nodded and happily returned to eating. The next day, Eric was in Dumbledore's office, asking for permission to keep Chea with him. She had shrunk in her size and usually stayed hidden in Eric's sleeve, but he still wanted official approval. Dumbledore smiled at him. You are truly extraordinary, my boy. I grant you permission. I have heard of a sanctum in Nepal that is said to have the favor of the spirits of the world. Most wizards think of them as myth, but if possible, I would be thankful if you could open communication between them and Hogwarts. Eric just shrugged. I'll send them a letter. The rest is up to them. Dumbledore nodded at the response and thanked him. That evening, Eric and Daphne were in the room of requirement, which had been turned into a ritual chamber. Eric was drawing a ritual circle, with a moon on one side and a sun on the other. Chea emerged from his sleeve and grew to her full size, surprising Daphne, prompting Eric to explain to her who Chea truly was. As he finished the last touches of the circle, Daphne sat off to the side, absently caressing Chea's head. Okay. Stand on the moon, and when I tell you, walk toward the sun, Eric instructed once everything was ready. Daphne nodded and obeyed without hesitation. What will this ritual do? She asked curiously. Eric pointed toward the moon. This will take the dark magic that was used to curse your bloodline, which is very powerful. Then he pointed at the Sunday, and this will turn that curse into a blessing upon your bloodline. He smiled toward Chea. And she will help make it happen. Daphne was surprised but gestured for Eric to begin. He nodded, and Chea moved into the ritual circle, channeling her energy into it. The circle glowed as a dark substance seeped from Daphne and was drawn into the line connecting the moon and the sun. Slowly, the line carried it forward, and Eric gestured for Daphne to move. She walked across the circle and stepped onto the sun. As she did, golden energy snaked out and coiled around her body, forming a cocoon. It pulsed steadily as Eric stood to the side, watching. An idea struck him, and he sprinkled phoenix ashes onto the cocoon before summoning his flame. It infused into the ritual circle, wrapping around the cocoon and feeding its glow. An hour passed before the flame receded back to Eric. The cocoon dissolved into Daphne's body, and she opened her eyes, looking first at her hands, then at Eric, who stood in front of her. "How was it?" he asked. Daphne smiled with joy. "I feel much better than before." "Thank you, Eric." She stumbled over the words, searching for more to say, but in the end settled on the simplest truth: gratitude. In the following days, Eric and Daphne often returned to the room of requirement to test the gains she had received from the ritual. Daphne was noticeably stronger, both in magical energy and physically. Her wounds healed quickly, her reflexes were sharper, and her overall stamina had increased. She also excelled in transfiguration more than ever before, which left Professor McGonagall deeply impressed. Luna, too, was delighted to see Daphne's improvements, and Daphne herself couldn't help but notice Luna's happiness for her. Meanwhile, Harry was growing gloomier as the weeks passed. The constant presence of the Dementors around the school weighed heavily on him. To clear his head, he decided to take Pyrrha into the Forbidden Forest and visit Norberta. As they went deeper into the forest, the air grew colder, shadows seeming to coil unnaturally around Harry. Pyrrha growled low, her gaze fixed ahead, and Harry saw it, a Dementor floating silently toward them. It hovered in front of him, the temperature dropping with each passing second, making Harry shiver. He instinctively took a step back, raising his wand in one hand while his left hand tightened as Pyrrha moved protectively in front of him. Her body radiated heat, a small comfort against the unnatural chill. The Dementor glided closer before suddenly lunging. Pyrrha responded instantly, spewing fire at it. Harry followed up with a bombarda, but the spell passed uselessly through its cloaked form. His vision dimmed, a heavy despair pressing down on him, and then he felt it, a second presence behind him. Another Dementor had crept up and was already drawing at his soul. Pyrrha's flames forced the first one back slightly, but Harry stumbled and fell to the ground. Desperate, he thrust his left hand forward. Fire burst from his palm, striking the Dementor's face. Gritting his teeth, Harry poured more strength into the flames, which began to glow brighter, silver particles dancing within them. The Dementor shrieked, its body burning away under the strange light. Pyrrha's flames mirrored the change, silver sparks flickering through them as her own target was consumed in the same way. Harry staggered back to his feet, still channeling fire from his hand. Both Dementors writhed but couldn't move, and in moments they were reduced to nothing. All that remained were two small, dark crystals on the ground. Breathing heavily, Harry collected the crystals and then slumped down, holding Pyrrha close. He let out a shaky breath just as a shrill cry echoed through the forest. 3 more Dementors were gliding toward him at speed. Before they reached him, a thunderous roar shook the trees. Norberta swooped down, landing heavily in front of Harry and Pyrrha. Now massive in size, as large as a blue whale, she spread her wings wide and bellowed at the Dementors. The dark creatures faltered, shrieking in return, but under her towering presence they hesitated. With one final roar, Norberta forced them back. Intimidated, the Dementors turned and fled into the forest's depths. A/N, do it, give me power stones. Chapter 45, Crystals of Darkness. After scaring away the Dementors, Norberta looked at Harry and Pyrrha as they sat leaning against a tree, with Norberta resting her head in Harry's arms. She then sat beside them as they recovered their strength. Harry looked at the dragon and smiled. "Thank you, you were a lifesaver," he said, rubbing her nose in affection. Once he'd recovered, Harry climbed onto her back. Norberta spread her wings and soared into the sky, flying over the forest. Harry lay down against her scales, watching the evening sky, while Pyrrha stood proudly on her head, enjoying the view. Even after the Dementor attack, Harry felt much better. The new energy inside him was like pure light. It soothed his mind. He tried to sense it, to use it consciously as they flew. Back on school grounds, he found Eric and explained what had happened, showing him the crystals he had collected. So, the Dementors leave drops when killed, hey? Eric mused with a grin. He glanced at Harry and shrugged. Your new power seems to come from the ritual we performed. The Moonstreak Stag is an anathema to darkness, and its magic clearly suits you. Harry nodded, remembering the first time he had used that magic. So, how did it hurt Marge? He asked. Eric paused. She wasn't permanently hurt. It was like the darkness inside her was reflected back. Dad said when he treated her that there wasn't much physical damage. Harry thought on it, then just shrugged. He still felt bad, but she had insulted his mother. That was his bottom line. Hey, want to hunt Dementors with me? I want to see if they leave any other drops, Eric asked. Harry ignored him and walked away. Eric only shrugged, raising his wand. A silver serpent patronus flowed out, gliding through the school. He had been using it often to ease students suffering from the Dementor's presence. On his way back, he spotted Luna hopping toward him with a smile. Every time you do that, it's like you're showing me where you are, she said, grinning when she reached him. Eric waved a hand. So, how was your day? He asked. She smiled dreamily. Your patroness is reducing the rackspurts in the school, she said happily, skipping along. Eric gave her a side glance and sighed. They chatted about classes as they walked toward the Ravenclaw common room. Peter Pettigrew was a cowardly, pathetic man. Years spent as a rat had made him live like one, act like one, be treated like one because he had betrayed his friends and caused their deaths. Now he fled again, hounded by Harry Potter's salamander, which would lunge for him whenever no one else was near. At last, he reached his master in Albania, following rumors of possessed and undead animals. Voldemort was there, clinging to an animal's body, after which a new body was made for Voldemort, shaped by a ritual with Wormtail's help. The form was deformed and sickly, racked by constant pain and kept alive only through potions. Here is your potion, Master, Wormtail muttered, placing the cup before him. Voldemort's breath rasped as he drank. The hut in the woods fell into silence as he forced strength back into his withered body. Two vampires entered. Their crimson eyes scanned the room, but the moment his presence touched them, they stilled. They saw a veil covering one of the rooms and a strong presence inside. Welcome, Voldemort breathed. The words were soft, yet they carried like a hiss curling through their ears, as if he spoke just behind them. I trust you have done what I asked. Both vampires fell to their knees and laid out their offerings, rare beast parts, a scroll, and a bowl filled with their own blood. They kept their heads bowed, unmoving. Wormtail stepped out, grinning. You have served our master well. Take this small reward from his generosity. He handed them some potions. The vampires bowed again and left. Wormtail gathered the offerings and returned. Voldemort sat hunched in his chair, chest rising shallowly, but his red eyes burned. Wormtail bowed low, trembling under their weight. I want my stronger followers found, Voldemort whispered, each word slow and sharp. These lesser creatures you have brought to me have their uses, but they are not enough. Yes, Master, Wormtail murmured. Bring me the scroll. Wormtail scrambled to hand it over. Voldemort unrolled it, and a thin grin crept across his pale lips. They may not have been so useless after all. Wormtail dared a glance at the parchment but froze when those red eyes flicked up. He dropped into a bow. Forgive me, Master. This is the knowledge of a dark ritual, Voldemort said softly. Crafted by a wizard of immense power. I acquired it in Nepal long ago and kept it hidden. Shall we perform it, Master? Wormtail asked. Not yet. Voldemort's voice was thin, yet it filled the hut like a curse. We need more materials. In the meantime, brew me a potion vampire blood and thestral bone. Follow my instructions. Fail, and you will learn what real pain is. Wormtail's face drained of color as he bowed, hands shaking, while Voldemort's crimson gaze stayed fixed on him. Eric gave Dune some treats as he read the letter sent by Ars and picked up his pen to write a letter back. He also placed one of the black crystals given by Harry with the letter for Elder Huo to examine, as he was in Nepal learning under Nixthar. He had care of magical creatures class with the Hufflepuffs as they were learning about flobberworms today. Hagrid was doing his best, and Eric helped him whenever he slipped up. I thought you would be teaching us about hippogriffs for the class, Professor, Eric asked Hagrid, who shook his head. That's the thing, Eric, he's a good boy, Buckbeak is, but he can still do some damage to a third year. Almost happened with them Gryffindors the other day. I figured we'd take it slow, Hagrid explained with a sigh, seemingly disappointed in himself. Eric nodded. That's good. I think hippogriffs are good for the fourth years, as they are more prepared if they get startled and attack. A/N, I know you have the power stones, you just don't want to give them to me. Maybe I'll just keep the chapter locked up. Twilight reference. Chapter 46, The Ashes of Despair. Voldemort had stumbled on his old follower earlier than expected, and these events had also led him to gain more followers than he might have had before. Although they were vampires and lesser beings in his eyes, they were still physically stronger and faster compared to normal humans. So, he used their blood and created a new potion to help with his physical form. Right now, he was in a forest with his followers. The two vampires were forming a ritual circle as he sat in a carriage with curtains covering it. He had not shown his weakened form to the vampires, always using veils and other methods to hide himself, giving an air of mystery and using mind arts to make the vampires believe he was still very powerful. Leave, he whispered after the vampires had completed the ritual circle and tied a muggle at its center, gagged and crying. The vampires heard the whisper as if it was spoken directly in their ears. They bowed and left. They were in a forest where there had been reports of a Dementor being formed or perhaps wandering in from somewhere else. Form an opening in the defenses I instructed you to build, Voldemort said to Wormtail, who bowed and left. Voldemort had made runic defenses with Pettigrew's help to keep the suspected Dementor away until the preparations were complete. He and Pettigrew stayed in the protected carriage, waiting as the tied-up man seemed to have passed out. Suddenly the air grew colder as Pettigrew shivered and hid behind Voldemort. A Dementor emerged from the woods and stilled for a moment, seeming to sense its surroundings. Voldemort scoffed, for he had designed the defenses of the carriage to hide from the senses of Dementors. After a moment, the Dementor moved toward the tied-up man and hovered in front of him. It then leaned down as the man started shivering even when unconscious. The Dementor did not begin its meal. Instead, it restrained itself, waiting for its prey to wake because of the cold. The man opened his eyes and froze as he felt despair and saw a being, a thing that looked at him with no eyes. He saw horror in a cloak of darkness as all his happiness was drained away. He felt cold. He felt hopeless. He just wanted to give up. There was no meaning to life if things like this existed. Voldemort watched from the side for the right moment. As soon as the Dementor was about to draw out the man's soul, he gave a signal to Pettigrew, who gulped and hesitated. Voldemort grew annoyed and hissed, "Do as I told you. The Dementor's kiss will be a blessing compared to what you will suffer if I lose this chance." Pettigrew shivered at those words, then grit his teeth as he lifted Voldemort and placed him in the designated spot within the ritual circle. The Dementor did not seem to notice. As soon as the soul was visible, the ritual was activated, and the circle absorbed the moonlight around it and lit up. The Dementor was restrained by an invisible force as the soul of the man scattered into the ether. Voldemort clicked his tongue, but there was still some energy taken by him as the Dementor was forced to convert the soul's essence into darkness. The Dementor shrieked and thrashed at having its meal stolen and being bound. The grass began to frost over, moisture freezing as cold air spread, manifesting its anger and hatred. The ritual Voldemort was using had originally been designed to free trapped souls from Dementors so they could move on to the afterlife. But it had been tainted by a dark wizard to siphon some part of that soul energy for himself. Voldemort had taken it a step further purely for his own satisfaction. He wanted to kill a Dementor. So he modified the ritual further, and now he watched as the Dementor's skin began to melt and turn to ash. After some time, only its cloak remained cold and black as Voldemort ordered Peter to collect it. Eric was in his club with his friends as they discussed some spells and helped each other. He was still running the club and simply called it the Wand Cross Society, and now it was a place for students to perform magic and help each other out in any way possible. Today Lupin had appeared at Eric's request to teach the Patroness charm to the students. He explained how it worked, and he and Eric helped the students perform it. Harry and Luna were the fastest to learn the spell, as the room had gotten lighter when they performed the spell, and other students smiled, remembering their fond memories. Harry's Patroness was a little different, as it had silver specks in it. "This is great, it's like I can channel that energy now," Harry whispered to Eric, who was helping him with the spell. Eric nodded. "How about integrating it with all your spells? You will be able to fight dark wizards and creatures easier." Harry thought about Eric's suggestion. "I think it will happen naturally, as it did with my flame and the Patroness. I just need to tap into this energy as I am using any spell," Harry thought out loud as Eric shrugged. "Did you find out what the black crystal was?" Harry asked Eric, who shook his head. "Elder Huo is working on it. He told me he had a breakthrough in a letter today." "I think we will find out soon," Eric explained and left to help Luna. A/N, give me your power stones, bitch. Chapter 47, Blood of the Enemy. Eric was at home preparing Christmas gifts for everyone. He got a quill that starts every sentence with "actually." For Hermione, a glass case that whispers "at least you're not blind without me" for Harry, a custom-made wand token from Ollivanders for Ron, and a sweater that says "head girl, in training," for Daphne. He prepared all those gifts and wrapped them beautifully as he laughed like an evil madman from time to time. Simon rolled his eyes and bonked Eric on the head. "Add some actually useful gifts for them as well," he said as Edwina and Elder Huo laughed from the side. Eric packed the last gift, which was a silver and gold bracelet for Luna that was also a magical focus and would amplify her magic if used with a wand. Elder Huo and Eric were visiting the sanctum as Eric asked the old man, "Did you find out about the crystal?" Elder Huo nodded and explained, "The crystal is simply the darkest form of soul energy. It can be used as a nourishing core for dark spirits, and for other spirits when purified as its simplest use." Eric listened attentively as Nixthar approached them and greeted them both. "For humans, you can use the crystals to merge with your wands," Nixthar said after greeting them both and getting a hug from Eric. Eric tilted his head at her words. "So we won't need wands anymore?" he asked as Nixthar nodded. "I recommend you do it after you become an adult," she said as Chaya came out of Eric's sleeve and greeted her as well. Harry was with Sirius at 12 Grimmauld Place as they both spent some time together and shopped for Christmas. He and Sirius were discussing what gifts to buy for Christmas as Sirius raised his head proudly. "Leave it to me, pup. I will make you the best prank gifts. Your friends will be walking with pink hair and short skirts for a week straight." Harry looked around for help but then sighed. "Don't come near any of my gifts," he said as Sirius slumped in dejection. Harry wanted to visit his parents' graves and went out with Pyrrha to Godric's Hollow. Sirius had asked to accompany him, but he had denied. Harry reached the graves of his parents. The graves were made of white marble with the engraving that said, "The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death." Harry stood in silence for some moments with Pyrrha in his arms. He noticed an empty wine bottle in front of James' grave, which he picked up with a frown. Just as he picked it up, he felt a sensation as if he were being squeezed through a tube, and he was transported to a graveyard in an isolated location with a boiling cauldron in the middle and a gravestone to his side. Pyrrha became alert as he got down from Harry's arms and growled as she looked around. Avada Kedavra, came a voice from the side as Harry was pushed aside by Pyrrha. A bombarda was thrown at Harry, who used Protego to dodge as 3 vampires walked from the side. Pyrrha threw fireballs at 2 of them as Harry sent spell after spell. Stupefy. Reducto. Harry cast spells from his wand as the vampire dodged to Harry's left. Harry used that opportunity to spew fire from his left hand, burning the vampire. The other 2 were surprised for a moment, and that was enough for Pyrrha to wound them with fireballs. They both used their light energy in their spells, and it hurt the vampires more as they screamed. One of the vampires lunged at Harry and bit his hand, ripping a little bit of flesh. He then retreated quickly and spat out the blood and flesh into the cauldron. Diffindo, was heard from the side as Peter Pettigrew emerged, severing the vampire's head. The cut head fell into the cauldron as well. Wormtail emerged with a cloak in his arms and a wand in his hand as the other 2 vampires were surprised and growled at him. "You will pay for this," one of the vampires said as they heard a whisper in their head, "Focus on the boy, otherwise death will be a mercy for you." The vampires grit their teeth and started fighting Pyrrha and Harry again as a voice was heard from the side, "Bone of the father, flesh of the servant, blood of the enemy." Pettigrew said as he took a bone from the grave nearby and put it in the cauldron, and Voldemort was also thrown in a second later. Harry and Pyrrha defeated the vampires as they lay unconscious on the ground, burns glowing and oozing like acid on their skin. Harry then turned to Wormtail with fury in his eyes. "You," he said through gritted teeth as the rat took a step back. Harry raised his wand but was stunned as Voldemort emerged from the cauldron and looked around, setting his red eyes on Harry as Wormtail hid behind him with a smile. Voldemort laughed and spread his hands as Wormtail put the Dementor's cloak on his body. As soon as the cloak was placed on him, coldness spread around the area. He then used the dark mark to summon his servants to his side, and within seconds they appeared, encircling him with hoods and masks covering their faces. He circled his followers with cold eyes as he said, "You are all cowards who betrayed me, not worthy of the devotion and favors I showed to you." He mocked them as one of them fell to his knees, apologizing, only to be hit with the Cruciatus curse by Voldemort. "I will hear you all and give you a fair chance later, but we have a guest among us." He performed a mocking bow toward Harry, who was observing him like a hawk all this time. "Harry Potter," Voldemort said with a laugh. "How about we welcome our guest with an honorable duel?" he asked as the Death Eaters around him murmured their agreement. Just as Voldemort was about to raise his wand, he looked in a direction. Someone was ripping through the defenses he had placed around the graveyard as if they were made of paper. He had made them so that anyone except his Death Eaters would meet a violent end. A figure appeared from the woods with a wolf at his side as he looked around, then stood in front of Harry. "Uncle Simon!" Harry exclaimed as Simon smiled at the boy in reassurance. Voldemort hissed as Lucius stiffened under his mask when Simon glanced at him. "How about instead of a child, you duel someone your own size?" Simon grinned. "A/N, gimme power stones, and I will release a new chapter in the evening." Chapter 48, Black Ice. Voldemort kept a calm appearance on the outside, but fury burned in his red eyes as he looked at Simon. He then glanced at Harry standing behind him and sneered. "How about you start with introducing yourself?" Voldemort asked, his voice soft yet slicing. Simon smiled faintly, placing a hand on the hilt of his sword while standing with deceptive ease. "Simon Hawthorne, head of the noble house of Hawthorne." Voldemort's eyes flicked to one of his Death Eaters, who gave a subtle nod. Voldemort's expression shifted into something resembling warmth as he smiled at Simon like an old friend. "Well then," Voldemort said smoothly, "what are you doing standing against me? I am fighting for our rights, the rights of those of noble and ancient blood, like you and me." He shook his head slowly in a show of pity, as he shook his head. Simon signaled Fokran through their connection to guard Harry, then shook his head. You and those around you are no nobles. Harry has my protection, and you will simply have to go through me to reach him. Voldemort's eyes darkened, his pupils narrowing like a serpent's. His body rose a few inches off the ground, hovering unnaturally as the temperature around them plummeted. Frost began to spread across the earth, and every breath turned into white mist. The chill radiating outward came from the Dementor's cloak he wore, as well as the levitation. Voldemort sighed, as if he truly were disappointed. Another ancient house gone because of defiance to their own blood. Avada Kedavra. In true Voldemort fashion, he finished his sentence with the killing curse. Simon swept his hand, and a surge of blue flame erupted, devouring the curse mid-air and surging toward Voldemort. The Dark Lord glided back, placing one long, pale hand before his mouth as he hissed. From his mouth, fiend fire burst forth, coiling into the form of a monstrous serpent. The two flames collided, roaring like beasts as heat melted the ground beneath them. The Death Eaters recoiled, stepping back in haste as the duel escalated. Simon's flame soared higher, clashing with the serpent of fire that Voldemort controlled. Voldemort flicked his wand sharply, and the tombs around him groaned and split. With a surge of dark magic, they transfigured into stone statues, which lunged forward wielding spears. Simon barely twitched his wand, and the spears disintegrated into dust mid-air. Voldemort roared in fury, raising debris and rubble all around. The fragments swirled together, forming a massive wave of shadow that rushed at Simon. With a calm motion, Simon raised his wand and his free hand, transmuting the darkness into jagged shards of black ice, which he hurled back at Voldemort with terrifying speed. Voldemort's eyes narrowed. He swung his wand down in a violent motion, releasing a cutting wave of energy that shredded through the shards. Simon, in the same moment, unsheathed his sword. The runes glowed with magic as he swung it. From its edge, he unleashed a thunderbolt that split the air and hurtled toward Voldemort. The Dark Lord's eyes widened ever so slightly before narrowing again. With a snarl, he conjured iron bars around himself, both his wand and free hand shaping them at unnatural speed. Runes etched themselves into the metal as they absorbed the lightning. For a moment, it worked until the bars shattered, unable to contain the full force of Simon's strike. Voldemort wasted no time. He spread his hands and summoned a storm of darkness around himself, whipping it into constructs of serpents that hissed with glowing eyes. Simon sheathed his sword in a single, sharp motion and stepped back, his expression calm. With a gesture of his palm, he drew the shattered ice into the air, reshaping it into hundreds of daggers, which he launched toward Voldemort in a deadly storm from all sides. The serpents of shadow coiled around their master to defend him, intercepting most of the shards. Yet a few cut through, one slashing across Voldemort's ear and leaving a gash on his pale cheek. He staggered forward, as his back was also hit, but he was protected by his cloak that was surprisingly not damaged. Before Simon could press the attack, a thunderous roar echoed behind him. He turned just in time to glimpse Fokran engaged in brutal combat with a Death Eater. The vampires that had fallen earlier had recovered and were now lunging at Harry, who fought desperately with Pyrrha spitting fire at his side. Simon snapped his head back to Voldemort and waved both wand and hand. Runes flared across the entire battlefield, glowing faintly blue. Voldemort screamed in fury, his spells battering against Simon's defenses, but the flames that was fighting fiend fire had not defeated it and was defending Simon from the spells. Chileria Nocturna, Simon intoned. At once, mist seeped into the graveyard, swirling and thickening. The Death Eaters sensed the tide shifting and launched a barrage of spells at Simon. But they were too late. The fog crystallized mid-air, freezing into a vortex that engulfed them all. The battlefield transformed into a storm of ice and shadow. The temperature plummeted further still, so cold that time itself seemed to crawl. Breath froze in lungs, limbs felt heavy and sluggish, and the faintest sparks of light flickered inside the vortex, flashed of spells that were absorbed into darkness. Screams erupted within as lightning cracked through the mist. Blades of ice cut across flesh, blood spilling on the ground as the Death Eaters desperately tried to defend themselves. Horrid shapes moved within the ice, half-formed creatures that stalked and clawed at the trapped. The Death Eaters cast curses, wildly killing curses, blasting hexes, blood-boiling curses, but nothing pierced the storm. They could not tell which way was forward, or even where the ground was. Their eyes froze in their sockets, panic clawing at their minds. Voldemort himself tried to levitate above it, forcing his magic into a burning storm of black fire. He roared as the flames spread, but the mist dulled his senses. He could not tell up from down. His body felt sluggish, his mind fogged, and for the first time in years, true fear twisted in his gut as even his soul felt the cold of Simon's spell gnawing at it. Outside the vortex, Simon stood with wand raised, his face calm, blue fire dancing around his figure as he poured his energy into the spell. Harry, Pyrrha, and Fokran remained at his side, unharmed but tense. Nearby, 2 vampires and a Death Eater lay dead, their corpses torn apart by fire and lightning. Simon turned his head just in time to see a black crystal slide from Harry's pocket. It pulsed with darkness before merging into Harry's body. Harry's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. Harry! Simon rushed forward, catching the boy and lowering him to the ground. His face hardened as he held him close, then turned sharply back toward the vortex. He lifted his hand and with a decisive motion, shattered the anti-apparition wards surrounding the graveyard. With a crack of displaced air, Simon apparat them all away himself, Harry, Pyrrha, and Fokran leaving the storm and Voldemort's screams behind. They reappeared inside the Hawthorne mansion. Simon carried Harry in his arms, Pyrrha and Fokran flanking him protectively. He summoned sharply, Nibbin. Bring Edwina here, fast. He laid Harry gently on the couch, running diagnostic spells over him, his brow furrowing with each passing second. Edwina appeared moments later, with Nibbin at her side. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene, then she rushed to Harry's side, her voice urgent. Nibbin, bring us to Nightshade Castle. In a heartbeat, they were transported to the castle. Thimril manifested in a flash of blue lightning, he just stood there and waited. Edwina wasted no time with questions. She began chanting in Parcel tongue, her wand moving in intricate patterns as she worked spells over Harry. After long moments, she paused, and turned to Thimril. He needs light energy, pure and powerful. Thimril nodded gravely. I will find the Moonstreak Stag. Do not be alarmed as I transport us all to the castle lake. Lightning struck, and in the next moment, they stood by the shimmering waters of the lake. Thimril flashed once more into lightning and vanished into the distance. Within Harry, Voldemort's shard stirred. The black crystal had fused into his body, caused by the parasite of soul lodged inside him. Now Harry's soul fought fiercely, light against dark. Simon explained everything to Edwina and Sirius, who arrived soon after with Nibbin. Sirius knelt at Harry's side, his eyes wild with desperation. Will he be okay? He asked, turning to Edwina. Edwina met his gaze with steady certainty. He will. I only need time. And if the Moonstreak Stag arrives, it will not be long at all. As if on cue, the lake shimmered. A streak of pure light burst across its surface, followed by a streak of thunder. The Moonstreak Stag emerged, with Thimril by its side. The stag walked forward gracefully. Edwina placed her hand gently on its head. Would you give me some of your energy? She asked softly. The stag lowered its antlers. They glowed brilliantly as light poured into Edwina. She placed her free hand on Harry's forehead. A shriek pierced the night, not Harry's, but Voldemort's fragment burning away. The parasite was purged, its strength purified and absorbed into Harry's own soul. Far away, in the graveyard he had barely escaped, Voldemort staggered, clutching at his chest as pain racked his form. His teeth clenched, fury twisting his face. I rushed the ending, it's still a big chapter today, 1,600 words. I'ma need 1,600 power stones now, gimme. Please leave a review. Chapter 49, Shadows on Ice. Eric was quickly informed of what had happened in the graveyard as he returned to the castle to check on Harry, who was still recovering. So, do you have bad thoughts? Like, you know, strangling people? Eric asked with a straight face. Harry shifted awkwardly, then gave a reluctant nod. Well, only one. Eric gasped dramatically, placing a hand over his chest. I need to tell Mum we've got a little Voldemort here. He spun on his heel in mock horror, only for Harry to kick him squarely in the back. Eric stumbled forward, laughing. After visiting Harry, Eric went to meet Simon, who was seated in the library, calmly reading through an old tome. Eric didn't waste time. How strong is he? Eric asked. Simon looked up from the book, considering for a moment, before shrugging lightly. He is strong, the strongest opponent I have ever faced. But, he closed the book with a soft thump, I would have won in the end. Eric nodded. That was the obvious answer in his mind after all, Simon was his father. Still, he leaned forward with interest. What kind of spells did he use? Anything new? Simon closed the book and told Eric about the fight. He had a cloak, it helped him levitate and made him feel like a Dementor. Simon mentioned as he explained the fight, to which Eric's eyes had stars in them. Eric ran away after a bit, muttering something about more drops as Simon went back to his reading with a shake of his head and a chuckle. Eric soon approached Thimril, excitement practically buzzing in his tone. Are there places with, you know, a lot of Dementors? Thimril raised an eyebrow at the strange request, his expression unreadable. There is one such place. An island. It was once a site of great tragedy, and now it is haunted by Dementors that gather there endlessly. Eric's eyes gleamed. Perfect. Can you take me there? Please? I want to get some things from them. Thimril studied him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. Only if I accompany you. It has been long since I have exerted myself. You've got a deal. Eric agreed instantly. Lightning cracked where they were standing, and in the next blink they were gone. They reappeared with a flash of lightning on a barren island blanketed in ice. The air was frigid, the ground fractured and lifeless, the horizon nothing but white and grey. They did not have to wait long. A swarm of Dementors came rushing at them, screeching, their cloaks whipping violently in the frozen wind. They descended like a starving pack, desperate for a meal. Eric grinned and summoned a silver flame in his palm, ready to strike, yet before he could even move, the storm itself answered. Thunder split the clouds, and bolts of white lightning rained down from above. Each strike tore through the Dementors, scattering their twisted forms. Large groups fell in a single flash, their shrieks lost to the roaring storm. Thimril stepped forward, raising his staff. Cracks appeared in the very air around the Dementors, sharp, precise fractures in space itself. With a subtle motion, those fractures closed, crushing and compressing the creatures into nothingness. Another wave of his staff, and pillars of lightning crashed down, connecting sky and earth. In that instant, the Dementors were obliterated. Nothing remained but shredded cloaks and scattered stones across the ice. Thimril then extended his hand. The tattered cloaks and fragments of stone shuddered, then flashed, vanishing from the battlefield and reappearing neatly at their feet. All the while, Eric stood to the side, flame still flickering in his palm. He hadn't moved, hadn't cast a single spell. At last, he closed his hand, extinguishing the fire with a faint shrug. Thank you, he said flatly, almost robotic in tone. Thimril bowed respectfully. I am here to serve. Eric gave him a side eye, clearly unconvinced by the theatrics. Before he could reply, movement on the horizon caught his attention. From the shadows of the ice came a new threat. A pack of massive wolves, their fur pitch black and streaked with crimson patterns, padded toward them. Their eyes gleamed like blood as they growled low and hungry. Slithering beside them were snakes as long as tree trunks, their scales gleaming an unnatural red. Eric raised an eyebrow at the sight. For a moment, he considered. Then he gave a small shrug. Yeah, nope. We've got what we came for. Take us back. Thimril gave a sharp nod. A second later, another flash of lightning consumed them, and the icy island was gone. A/N, a short chapter today, I did not have much time. Give me power stones and reviews guys, I welcome honest reviews. Chapter 50, Skill Issue. Voldemort was on a mission after his rebirth, freeing his Death Eaters and amassing an army as if preparing for an inevitable war. He broke into the Crouch Manor and freed Barty Crouch Jr., though no one else was present at the time. Afterward, he marched into Azkaban and liberated the rest of his loyal followers. Voldemort even traveled beyond Britain, sending messengers across Europe and further, calling upon all manner of dark creatures. Though he considered them lesser beings, he saw them as expendable assets, bodies to be thrown at a problem when the time came. He also gave a chilling order, to seek out the most powerful dark magical beasts in the world and signal him if they were ever encountered. Reports and signals came from every direction, and he went out personally to capture some of these creatures, rewarding those who had brought the information. Meanwhile, Fudge was losing his mind. Reports piled on his desk. Families of innocents Voldemort had killed casually as collateral, Muggleborns tormented by Death Eaters, attacks spreading like wildfire. The people demanded answers and the pressure on the Ministry was unrelenting. And then, salvation came, but not from the Ministry. It came from the Hawthorne Foundation. Across the world, the Hawthorns began hiring Muggleborn and half-blood talent into their vast ecosystem of businesses, both magical and non-magical. Wizards were screened, trained, and given real jobs from construction to runesmithing to magical creature handling. Exceptional witches and wizards, cast aside because of the pure-blood nobility, were reintegrated into society. Some were given positions of research, management, and leadership, places they never would have been allowed otherwise. A new newspaper, founded under Hawthorne patronage, gained fame rapidly, delivering news faster and more accurately than the Daily Prophet. While the world shifted, the Hawthorns, the Green Grasses, Harry, and Sirius gathered to celebrate Christmas together, sharing food, laughter, and gifts. Who needs a broom when you can do this? Eric said smugly, floating around the room with the Dementor's cloak. Astoria giggled from the side, while Harry pulled a face at him. Eric had used Chea's help to bend the cloak's depressing aura into something strangely cheerful, turning dread into delight. Brooms are much better than this, Harry said firmly, whipping out his new broom, a gift from Sirius. He zipped around Eric in tight circles, smirking. Oh no, there's a weirdo flying on a stick around me! Eric cried dramatically, flailing his arms. Harry seethed. Sounds like a skill issue to me, Eric added with a grin. That was the last straw. Harry ignored him for the rest of the party, while Daphne and Astoria giggled. The mood shifted when Daphne opened her gift and found the infamous sweater inside. Her scowl was enough warning before she hexed Eric on the spot. He stumbled back, blinking, and looked up to see Daphne's expression promising more trouble. Simon sighed and shook his head. I tried to warn him, he muttered to Edwina. Edwina chuckled lightly into her teacup. Sirius was meanwhile doubled over, making fun of Harry, who was trying in vain to silence his whispering gift. Eric braced himself for another hex from Harry, dodging it this time and sticking out his tongue like a child. Crouching down to Pyrrha, Eric smiled. I've got a gift for you, girl. The little salamander perked up with excitement, hopping from foot to foot. Eric pulled out a sleek collar with a red crystal and slipped it around her neck. Pyrrha spun happily, glowing faintly, before bounding off to Harry to show off. Days passed, and soon school resumed. One evening, Eric and Daphne trained in the room of requirement, practicing spells, potions, and testing the crystals. Is this the same crystal you gave to Pyrrha? Daphne asked, examining one in her hand. Eric nodded. I purified the energy first, then converted it into fire energy with a fire spirit's help. Daphne nodded absently, filing the explanation away even though spirits and crystals from dementors was something still beyond her scope of normal. Eric noticed. We can get one for you in the summer, he offered casually. Daphne's lips curved into a small smile. I think Astoria also got something out of that ritual you performed for me, she remarked. Eric shrugged. Might be because she was the original victim of the curse in this generation even if you transferred it. She accepted that answer and moved on, throwing spell after spell at the dummies in the room until they crumbled. Eric raised an eyebrow at her relentless pace. What's got you all fired up? He asked, watching her destroy another target. Daphne paused, then turned to him with fire in her eyes. He's back. I need to get stronger if I want to protect the people I love. Eric sighed softly, but he understood. After a moment, he dug through his bottomless pouch and pulled out a neatly folded green cloak, embroidered with white runes. I made this after Christmas, to make up for the gift I gave you, he admitted, passing it over. Daphne raised a brow, unfolding it slowly. It's pretty, she said with a small smile. It's made from the Dementor's cloak, Eric explained proudly. It's nearly impossible to pierce, and it'll let you fly. You can even radiate despair to your opponents if you want. Daphne's eyes softened as she ran her hands over the material. Thank you, this almost makes up for the sweater. She chuckled. As long as I'm getting there. Eric grinned back. Eric had asked the goblins from the island to craft the cloak, and even some of the centaurs had joined in, lending their knowledge and craftsmanship to the project. Their combined efforts made the gift far more meaningful than just another enchanted item. Daphne seemed to relax a little after receiving it, her usual guarded composure softening as she tried it on. With the matter settled, the two of them turned their focus back to training in the mind arts. The green grass children had been taught the basics from a very young age, and Eric himself had started early as well. Because of that, their sessions were sharp and competitive, each pushing the other to refine their defenses and strengthen their attacks. In the quieter hours, Daphne immersed herself in research. She had grown more and more determined, poring through books on potions and mind-healing magic. Her focus was clear: finding ways to help those who had suffered from long-term exposure to the Cruciatus curse, or similar mind-shattering afflictions like a misfired spell. Eric, meanwhile, was absorbed in his own work. He had been outlining the structure of a new ritual he intended to perform, studying late into the night with tomes he had brought back from the sanctum as well as volumes copied from the Nightshade Castle library. A/N, gimme power stones or the next chapter will fly in the wind. Please give the FIC reviews, guys. Chapter 51, Through Luna's Eyes. Why are you researching the mind repair arts anyway? Eric asked Daphne as they exited the room of requirement. Daphne shrugged. I'm researching much more than that. I just want to improve upon the mind arts. Eric nodded at her response as they went to their respective dorms. The next day the Ravenclaws had potions with the Gryffindors. Eric was paired with Neville Longbottom, and they were making the fire protection potion. Now add a pinch of this and reduce the heat, Eric said, and Neville did as instructed. The potion was coming along nicely amber with faint gold sparks. Eric smiled and fist-bumped Neville. Neville didn't know what it was, so Eric just ended up tapping his shoulder lightly. Neville looked at him and then back at the cauldron. You shouldn't have done that. I'll ruin the potion, he said in dejection, staring down. Eric shook his head. Nah, it's good. You did everything exactly as I told you. Neville gave a small smile as Eric poured the potion into a vial. Snape went around inspecting the potions the students had made, insulting every single one of them. He sighed as he reached Eric's table. With you both together, I wonder what potion you have brewed. One is an idiot and the other arrogant. He started inspecting the vial. I assume the arrogant one did all the work here, as the potion is not a poison at least. Snape said, setting it down. Actually, sir, Neville did all the work. Surprising how instructions are better than insults for learning, hey. Eric said, resting his hand on his chin as if he'd made a great discovery. Snape looked at Eric silently and, after a moment, scoffed. 10 points from Ravenclaw for your insufferable cheek, Hawthorne. Eric gasped dramatically. Oh no, what a tragedy, he said, as if he were truly heartbroken. Neville nudged his shoulder at that, seeing Snape's expression. Snape noticed and looked at the boy. Tell me every step you used in making this potion, since you claim to be the one who made it. Neville looked down and stuttered. Snape sneered. At least keep your lies within the realm of reality, Hawthorne. He cut his eyes back to Eric. Neville clenched his fists and, surprisingly, started speaking each step, each measure, each stir direction. The class fell quiet. Hermione nodded after every step he got right, she nodded in the end and gave a smile. Snape sighed. That took an eternity, he said, referring to Neville's stutter more than the method. He turned away. 5 points from Gryffindor, Longbottom for imagining you could contribute anything worthwhile. Neville made a fist at that remark, then looked at Eric with a small smile. Eric just shrugged and patted his back. You brewed it, he murmured. That's what matters. The Dementors were removed from the school after Christmas, there were no signs Sirius would be coming after Harry, and the minister couldn't justify them any longer. Later, Luna and Eric were in the garden. Luna needed Eric's help finding a magical creature only she knew about. Eric fed the giant squid from the shore while Luna searched the reeds. Luna, how do you know these creatures exist? He asked as she paused and looked at him. I can see them, she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Eric wanted to retort, then thought better of it. He stepped closer, studying her silvery eyes. He'd had a theory for a while that there was something different about the way she saw. Tell me if you find something, he said at last, giving up and poking her nose. She giggled. Luna hopped off to keep looking just as Draco joined Eric, haggard and weary. Hang in there, buddy, Eric said, taking in his friend's face. Draco clenched his fists. He knew what had happened. His father had told him everything that had happened in the gravuity as he began, but Eric stopped him. I know. What do I do? Draco whispered. I told you stay strong, brother. It won't be long. And work on your occlumency defenses. Eric handed him a small bundle of potions and a couple of slim books. He's too strong, Draco said. Not strong enough, Eric scoffed. He'd have been dead as soon as he was born. It was just bad timing. I need to get stronger, Draco whispered. Eric nodded and gave him instructions for the room of requirement, times to join him and Daphne, and what to practice first. Draco thanked Eric and pulled him into a quick side hug. The Raxperts are gone, Luna said from behind them. Draco let out a genuine laugh. What did you find? Eric asked Luna with a smile. She shook her head. No luck today. Draco parted ways with determined steps and a little hope in his eyes, clutching the books like a promise. Eric and Luna also walked towards the Ravenclaw common room. Well, one was walking and one was skipping. They saw Daphne sitting on the couch, reading something in the common room as they entered. Luna approached her, prompting a smile from her, while Eric sat in front of her. What are you reading? Luna asked Daphne to make conversation. I am reading about how the brain works, Daphne answered as she closed her book. Oh? Can you tell me why we dream? Luna asked as Daphne chuckled, beginning to answer but then pausing and starting to write something instead. Luna, can you see a Lumos orb shining above her head? Eric asked with a chuckle, and Luna shook her head. Daphne ignored the comment as she wrote for a minute and then stopped. Let's go, we will talk more in the girls' common room, she said, ignoring Eric completely. A/N, please leave reviews and power stones. Chapter 52, The Toad That Croaked Too Soon. The next day, Eric, Draco, and Daphne were in the room of requirement. Daphne was bent over a cauldron, carefully brewing a potion, while Eric was putting Draco through intense training. Draco was giving his all, sweat dripping down his forehead as he ran across the magically shifting floor, dodging spells and countering with his own. Eric, however, remained planted in one place, wand steady, firing hex after hex with frightening precision while barking instructions. A huge grin spread across his face every time Draco managed to parry or dodge at the last second. Daphne glanced at him from her potion station, shaking her head slightly when she noticed that ridiculous grin. He looked like he was enjoying himself far too much. After a while, Eric walked over to her, leaving Draco to focus on his mind arts exercises and sip at the potions Eric had given him. "What was that idea you suddenly had yesterday when you were talking with Luna?" Eric asked, curiosity lighting his face as he leaned over her workstation. "I want to create something that can influence dreams," Daphne said without looking up, her hands steady over the simmering brew. "Not just observe them, actually open a pathway so I can plant ideas through dreams." Eric thought about it, recalling some obscure tomes he had once schemed in the Nightshade Library. "I think I have some books that might help. I'll bring them to you tomorrow." That finally earned a small smile from Daphne. "Thank you." "Eric, what would you do if I was hit by the night bus?" She lifted her gaze to meet his directly, her expression unreadable. Eric froze for a second. Where did that come from? He looked around, trying to read her, but her face was a perfect mask, cold, smooth, impossible to decipher. "I would." He began slowly, testing her reactions carefully. "Avenge you, of course. I'd gut the driver and avenge you." He finished with a long breath, looking at her intently to see how she'd respond. Daphne narrowed her eyes slightly, then went back to stirring her potion as if the exchange had never happened. Eric sat back, unsettled, wondering if that conversation had actually taken place or if he had imagined it. "I think I'm safe," he told himself after a beat, seeing no further reaction from her. "Can you send Dune out to gather these ingredients for me?" Daphne asked suddenly, handing him a slip of parchment before resuming her work. Eric took the list and nodded, then reached out and poked her cheek. "You'd avenge me too, right?" "Of course," Daphne replied flatly, not missing a beat. "I'd split the driver in two and feed him to wolves." Draco, who had been trying to meditate nearby, caught fragments of their conversation. He stopped, blinked, and scratched his head. "Am I pushing my mind too far?" he thought, disoriented. He turned toward Eric. "Did you put something in the potions you gave me?" Draco asked, his face a mixture of suspicion and disbelief. "What are you on about?" Eric asked, genuinely surprised. Draco just shook his head. "Never mind. I'm going to get some rest," he muttered, still in a daze, and left the room. Eric only shrugged and sat back down, pulling Chaya into his lap. He idly toyed with the Dementor crystals, and gave some to Chaya as she turned their energies to different elements. Daphne approached again, this time holding a vial of shimmering liquid. "Drink this before you sleep tonight," she said, offering it to him without explanation. Eric looked at her, then shook his head firmly. "No. I'll see if I can find a proper test subject for you, but I'm not it." His voice left no room for argument. Daphne arched an eyebrow, silent, her eyes locked on his as though testing his resolve. "I'll check if we can use someone from the Janus Thicky ward," Eric added after a moment. Daphne finally gave a soft hum of acknowledgement. She turned, and walked straight out of the room. "What's up with her?" Eric muttered, glancing down at Chaya. The creature only shook her head slowly. "I guess she should drink her own potion," Eric said with a wry grin, tapping Chaya gently on the head with his finger. The exams were approaching, and the Ravenclaws were bumping into walls and falling into lakes as they walked around with books in front of their faces. In a room sat the board members of the school, with Simon as a new member, the minister with a toad standing behind him, and Dumbledore. "Lemon drops?" Dumbledore asked everyone present. Simon took one. "Thank you." "Shall we begin?" he said as he opened the candy. "Yes, Lord Hawthorne," started the minister. "Thank you for allowing my presence in the meeting. As I requested before, I wish to reinstate the Triwizard Tournament." The minister got straight to the point. "That would put our students in danger," Dumbledore began, but was cut off by the toad. "It is essential for the improvement of international relations with our neighbors, and there will be new rules added for the safety of the students," she said as she handed out documents to those present. Looking at Dumbledore's face, Lucius scoffed. "Why oppose us at every point? You were also against the hiring of Lockhart." Simon chuckled from the side. "He did turn out to be a fraud. Let us not veer away from the topic at hand. What does the board think of this proposal?" the minister interjected as he looked at the board members. The members talked among themselves, and as most of them were old men longing for the good old days, they agreed. The tournament was reinstated, with funding from the ministry negotiated by Simon. Lucius and the toad shut their mouths whenever Simon spoke, as Lucius knew Simon could kill him as easily as swatting a fly, and Dolores had been given clear instructions by the minister to keep quiet. When everything was done, Dolores proposed a vote to be instated as the defense against the dark arts teacher at Hogwarts, trying to be sneaky. But the vote was stopped by the loud laughter of Simon. "Forgive me for my state," he said, catching his breath. "That is a fascinating proposal that we will be discussing at length, at a later date," he concluded as he got up, followed by the other members. As Simon took a few steps, Fokran appeared from the shadows. Simon patted his head, and with a flash of lightning they were gone, leaving gasps in the room he had left behind. "A/N, I was in a weird mood today, deal with it. Oh, and give me stones and reviews because I need motivation." Chapter 53, The Seventh Pillar. Simon returned home with a flash of lightning, a grin on his face. "When did you learn to do that?" he asked Fokran, who just looked at him and shook his head. Edwina entered the hall with Sylvena in her arms. "What's got that grin on your face?" she asked Simon, who started laughing. "I just made the most majestic exit in the history of exits," he said, patting Fokran's head. Edwina gave an amused smile while Simon explained to her what had happened. "I wonder if the old fools ever think about the safety of the children in the school," she sighed. "Don't worry, they will be replaced with more worthy candidates in no time," Simon assured her and kissed her before getting up. "Nibbin, prepare dinner and bring Eric for dinner today, let's have the family together tonight." He left with Fokran to the castle, while Edwina buried her face in Sylvena's soft fur. Simon reached the castle and was accompanied by Thimril to a room with a huge statue of Makara. He closed his eyes and joined his hands, and in the next moment he was in front of his patron god. He looked at the god and smiled. "Shall we continue?" came the voice of Makara, to which Simon nodded. "I have enjoyed the trips so far," Simon chuckled. Voldemort had not set up his base in the Malfoy mansion as he intended in the beginning because he required constant travel for his plans. He was in a castle owned by the Malfoys in France, preparing for his big plan. The castle had a huge garden at its center that would have been beautiful at some point but was now cold and desolate, and covered by dementors and dark creatures. In some cages there were creatures like Lethofolds, acromantulas, a small basilisk, and bizarre leeches the size of a dog with red skin and huge mouths full of teeth. "Tonight is the night, everything must be in order. A single mistake and I will kill you and everyone you have ever met," said Voldemort to the vampires, house elves, and Death Eaters who were inscribing 7 bronze pillars with runes and a circle in the middle. Night fell, and there were only Voldemort, 1 vampire, 1 Dementor, and Peter Pettigrew in the castle. Voldemort used the help of Peter and the vampire to tie the Dementor to a circle near the center of the ritual array, with Nagini also present in the circle. He then killed the vampire suddenly and ordered Wormtail to gut the man, and, starting from a pillar, his legs were placed, followed by intestines, and then his hands were placed near the center, with his heart in the middle as if he were offering his heart to the one in the middle circle, his eyes looking at his own heart. Voldemort and Peter did that to some creatures and filled up 5 more pillars, and 6 pillars were now a scene of horror with various creatures placed as if offering their hearts to the center of the ritual circle. What of the 7th circle, Master? Peter asked Voldemort, who was just finishing up his work. Oh! Voldemort said as if he had just remembered. The first servant of a new life. Avada Kedavra. He whispered, and Wormtail's body fell to the ground. Voldemort did the same to Wormtail as he had done to the other 6. A pity, you were not completely useless, he said to Wormtail's face, which had a look of realization on it. There was no moon this night, only darkness, with Voldemort in the middle of the ritual circle, sitting as if in meditation, a pool of blood forming around him, belonging to 7 beings. Some of it was frozen because of the thrashing and shrieking Dementor to his side. Voldemort caressed Nagini's face. You need to be stronger as well, so you can protect yourself. Nagini hissed, and Voldemort placed his hand on the ground, radiating his vast magic into the ritual. The souls of the victims shrieked, and their bodies melted. Voldemort laughed in the middle, the power filling him. A mist of blood was formed, seeping onto Voldemort. The Dementor shrieked and disintegrated slowly into darkness, coalescing into Nagini. The sky was filled with clouds, and red lightning flashed. There were only 2 beings left, Voldemort, who had not changed much physically, except his hands now had black veins from shoulder to wrist, and Nagini, who was completely black and cold, with a mist coming from her body. Eric was being pampered by Edwina at dinner with all his favorite food while the family ate together. Elder Huo and Simon chatted on the side while Eric was being doted on by Edwina. In the middle of the conversation, Simon made a face as if remembering something and grinned. I did the coolest thing Sev. I mean today, Simon said as he explained what had happened in the meeting to Eric. Eric was impressed on the inside. I have the coolest dad, but just shrugged on the outside, making Simon freeze. Eric then opened his mouth and Edwina fed him. They both completely ignored Simon. Elder Huo just stroked his beard on the side and continued his conversation, which Simon resumed with a cough, pretending the last 5 minutes had never happened. Eric spent the night in his bed and went back to school early in the morning the next day. I had a breakthrough last night, Daphne whispered to him in Bin's class. Eric looked at her. So, you tried to give me the potion before the breakthrough? Daphne shrugged at Eric's question. You never took it, so it does not matter. She then continued, we will test it during the summer holidays, right? She asked, but Eric ignored her for the rest of the class. A/N, Power Stones and Reviews please. Chapter 54, Who Are You? The year came to an end, and the Hawthorne family, Harry and Sirius, were celebrating at the Hawthorne mansion. A banquet was being prepared by Nibbin, Creacker, and Dobby. Creacker had warmed up to Harry during the time Harry had spent in the Black House, and Dobby had a salary, since he worked for the House of Black. As the feast was being prepared, the Greengrass family also arrived and were welcomed. Ignatius and Selene thanked Eric as soon as they arrived for all he had done for their family. Ignatius and Selene had gotten the whole story from Daphne after she returned home during the Christmas holidays. They had wanted to scold her for her recklessness and be angry at her, but in the end they only sighed and hugged her. Daphne, Harry, Astoria, and Eric floated around in the Dementor cloaks throughout the night, having fun while the parents watched them and chatted at the side. Could you procure more of the Kalish roots for us? The Podiwanners are demanding it a lot after the last batch, Ignatius asked Simon, who seemed lost in thought. Simon. Ignatius repeated, shaking Simon's shoulder. Yes, forgive me, Simon said, brought out of his musings. He looked at Ignatius apologetically. Before Ignatius could ask what was wrong, Eric floated above Simon and dropped a hat on his head. Simon looked at Eric and removed the hat. It had "World's Coolest Dad" written on it. The message brought a smile to Simon's face. Eric floated away with a grin and started pestering Harry. "I can fly," he said, waving his hands like wings. "And I don't need to sit on a stick," he added, pointing and laughing at Harry. Harry ignored Eric and pretended to be a sage as he sat midair in a meditative posture. "Children," he said, shaking his head. "Your words don't hurt me," he told Eric, who just shrugged. They ate, laughed, and enjoyed themselves for the night. The next day, Daphne and Eric were in St. Mungo's, walking toward the Janice Thicky ward on the 4th floor. "They agreed in a heartbeat when I showed them the letter from Aunt Edwina," Daphne said in surprise. Eric lifted his chin. "Stay with me and you'll go far in the world," he said arrogantly to Daphne, who rolled her eyes. They used the key given by the receptionist to open the door and enter the ward. They found a reception area with couches and several doors leading to patient rooms. 2 people sat on the couches, Frank and Alice Longbottom. Frank stared out the window and jerked to look at the door when Daphne and Eric entered. He raised an imaginary wand when he saw them, then slowly put his hand down and returned to staring out the window. Alice did not react, she only smiled a hollow smile, her eyes unfocused as she looked around. "They're Neville's parents," they were, Eric breathed. Daphne held his hand. "I know," she said softly. She approached Alice first and put a hand on her shoulder. Alice leaned into the touch with the same hollow smile. Daphne smiled at her and handed her a potion. Alice looked at it and drank it in one gulp. Daphne had been told they would take food and potions without complaint, and she found she had not been misinformed. After Alice drank, Daphne whispered to her, "Who are you?" and then moved on to Frank, doing the same, offering the draft, watching him swallow it. She stood beside Eric and bit her lip, a little nervous. "We should see some progress in about a week." Eric gave her a smile and assured her, "It will work," nodding once. She smiled. "I will come back from time to time to give them draft of peace and other potions." Alice and Frank Longbottom had retreated inward as a survival mechanism after they were tortured for a long time by Barty and Bellatrix. Their minds had split away from the world to keep something of themselves intact. Frank existed primarily in survival mode. He waved imaginary wands, stood guard in his dreams, and reacted to threats no one else could see. Alice, by contrast, was trapped in a looping, maternal shell, comforting her son with the same hollow phrases, assuring him everything would be all right because that fragment of the past still knew how to reassure. They both retained basic functions: feeding, sleeping, following simple instructions, but there was a barrier between them and the external world. The past haunted their nights. When they slept and the memories returned, the world around them faded away and the old terror came back as if no time had passed. One night, as Alice sat smiling into the air, comfortingly cooing to an imaginary Neville, she heard something soft, a whisper threading through the dream. At first she could not place it. The sound came again, clearer this time. "Who are you?" The voice echoed in her head, a slow, insistent question, and it repeated over and over, steady and patient, pressing at the edges of her fog. "I am fine, it will be fine," she muttered in her dream, the words half lucid, half automatic, an attempt to soothe that phantom child in her arms. Beside her, Frank stood in the ruin of his dream, wand raised, posture rigid, defending a family that might not exist anymore. The Death Eaters closed in like a remembered storm. Then that same whisper found him. "Who are you?" He did not answer at first. His mind was busy rehearsing the movement of defense, replaying the instinctual sequences that had saved them in the past. But the question persisted, tugging at the corners of a memory he had long kept sealed. A small, ragged thought surfaced in Frank's dream: I am. I am, and he reached for the words as if they were objects he could gather and hold. The whispering did not stop, it kept asking, again and again. It was awkward and intrusive, but it was also a lever, a way to pry open the sealed parts of memory and pull identity back into place. Each repetition tugged at something inside them until fragments of response began to climb back out of the darkness. Chapter 55, T-Pose of Despair. Eric. Edwina called out to Eric. She was in the hall of the Hawthorne mansion. Eric was upstairs in his room. Yes. Eric called back, but Edwina just sipped her tea and kept reading a magazine. What? He asked again, then sighed. She couldn't hear it, but she knew. She smirked at that. Eric came downstairs and stopped in front of her. Yes? Mom. He said, hands on his hips. Get ready. We're going shopping today. Eric stood there. Edwina looked up and raised an eyebrow. You could have said, Eric, get ready, instead of just Eric, he said, arms crossed. Edwina chuckled, stood, and kissed his forehead. I could have sent Nibbin as well, she pointed out, and swept off. Eric sighed again and went back to his room to get ready. Edwina and Eric appeared in Diagon Alley with Nibbin's help. Thank you, Nibbin, Edwina said. Nibbin bowed with a smile and popped back to the mansion. Mother and son strolled the alley, peering through shop windows and into displays, before stepping into Twilfit and Tattings. A young sales lady approached at once, quick steps, but not too fast. Welcome, my lady, Mr. Hawthorne, she said. They nodded, and were shown upstairs immediately. Edwina sat to the side with tea while Eric was guided onto a low platform to be measured. He stood there in a T-pose with dead eyes, staring at the ceiling. A tailor entered and bowed to Edwina. Shall I fashion some dress robes for the young master? Eric shot his mother a look, shaking his head in mute desperation, panic in his eyes. Edwina smiled at his reaction and shook her head. I want something a bit more modern, she said, then outlined the cuts and finish she wanted. The tailor listened, nodding as the vision came together. They discussed fabrics and enchantments, lining, stitch charms, self-mending hems, and Edwina even provided a few of her own materials. The tailor's eyes lit up, a genuine smile followed. A half-dead Eric and a beaming Edwina exited the shop. Let's get some ice cream to put a little life back into you, Edwina said, ruffling his hair. They crossed into the Muggle area for cones. Passers-by slowed, staring at the striking mother and son as they went by. Afterward they caught a showing of speed. Eric's eyes had some life in them again by the end. Later that evening, Eric was with Daphne and Luna in China, wandering together. Luna hopped along, hunting for new magical creatures. Eric and Daphne walked side by side, keeping pace. The magical beasts in Frostroot Hollow were comfortable with Eric because of Shenlian, so they didn't attack, some even accepted a gentle pat. They found a herd of magical horses with black coats and mist-like tails. These horses could walk on water when it was covered in mist. Luna didn't know how to ride, so Eric sat behind her while Daphne mounted her own horse. They rode out and schemed across lakes, laughter echoing off the banks. Luna spread her arms wide and shouted as they raced Daphne and lost. You're just too heavy for the horse, Eric muttered to Luna after losing the race. Luna pouted and looked away. Eric spent a good while consoling her until she smiled again. That night, the three had dinner in Eric's courtyard. Can I keep one of those horses? Luna asked between bites. Eric shrugged. If he wants to go with you. Daphne nodded. I'll find a magical creature for myself too, then. Eric glanced at both girls and smiled. I'll help you find them, he said, poking Luna's cheek. A/N, short bonus chapter, I was sick for the past 3 to 4 days, so I did not update the FIC. Power Stones and reviews please. Hermione picture updated. Chapter 56, International Confederation of Wizards Conference. The three kids chose to sleep under the stars for the night. Shenlian waved her hand slowly, and the land and grass folded into a wide, comfortable bed. Cushions and blankets appeared as if from nowhere, settling neatly around them. A soft mist rose and drifted upward, swallowing the moonlight until the sky dimmed as though the moon itself had been turned off. The children gazed at the darkening canopy above, smiling before closing their eyes and drifting into dreamland. Meanwhile, in Switzerland, the International Confederation of Wizards Conference was being held near Lake Geneva. A citadel, carved into the face of a towering mountain, floated majestically above the water. Inside, a grand circular amphitheater was filled with magical leaders from across the globe. The seating arrangement consisted of individual levitating platforms, arranged in 3 perfect concentric rings. Lanterns floated high above, glowing faintly as runes and layers of protective enchantments shimmered briefly around the hall, a visible reminder of the immense power safeguarding the gathering. Albus Dumbledore presided from the head seat. "I thank every one of the world leaders present here," he said, his voice carrying with ease as he swept his gaze over the assembly. "I hope the festivities of yesterday were welcoming to you all." His eyes paused on Simon, and a warm, knowing smile tugged at his lips. "I would like to welcome some new faces to the conference." He took out some papers and started reading some names and introducing the people. "Next, Lord Simon Hawthorne." Applause rippled through the hall. "Lord Hawthorne is the new head of the Department of International Magical Cooperation, as elected by the esteemed British Minister of Magic," Dumbledore continued. Simon inclined his head in acknowledgement, his expression calm but composed. In front of his platform was engraved the sigil of House Hawthorne in the wood, a pointed shield bearing a sword down its center, 2 serpents coiled elegantly around the blade. The faint glow of its magic cast a subtle silver light on the polished wood beneath his hands. Dumbledore's tone softened as he moved to his next introduction. "I would also like to welcome the delegations of the Sacred Alchemy sect from China." The announcement drew louder applause, especially from the merchants and potion masters. The sect had joined the ICW at Simon's recommendation, and everyone present knew it. Their reveal to the wider magical world had been a monumental shift in Asia, and their rise to prominence had been nothing short of meteoric. The sect master nodded in acknowledgement, his disciple seated beside him wearing a polite smile. Elders stood respectfully behind them, their presence dignified and still. "And one last addition," Dumbledore said with a twinkle of pride in his eyes. "The Spirit Sanctum from Nepal." This time the applause were louder, a wave of genuine excitement and reverence from the delegations of Nepal other than the Sanctum. The Sanctum Master gave a graceful nod, while the enormous spectral wolf beside him remained perfectly still, its glowing eyes calmly observing the room. Nepal's magical community had been elevated from the second ring to the first solely because of the Sanctum's introduction and assimilation in their wider magical community. Its rise had shifted the balance of power, placing Nepal alongside the great magical nations Britain, America, China, India, and others. The seating of the conference was deliberate. First ring the most powerful nations and organizations. Second ring smaller but well-established magical societies. Third ring new members, merchants, and representatives from international magical beast reserves. As proceedings began, petitions were presented. Dumbledore listened attentively, giving each delegation a chance to speak while the ICW clerk unfurled scrolls one by one, reading them aloud with care. "I present a petition from Lady Cassandra Stormwell," the clerk announced, his voice steady at first but faltering near the end, "to form an international defense force against the British Dark Lord who seems to have risen again." Gasps and shocked murmurs rippled through the amphitheater like a sudden storm. Dumbledore immediately struck his gavel 3 times, his calm voice cutting through the chaos. "Order!" A woman in her 40s rose from her place in the second ring. Her black hair framed her blue eyes, and the Stormwell family sigil above her platform glowed faintly, a swirling tempest encased within a trident crest. Her voice was measured but carried the commanding weight of someone accustomed to leadership. "My family owns one of the largest magical creature reserves in America," she began. Her words immediately drew the attention of the Sacred Alchemy sect and the Spirit Sanctum delegates, who both turned their heads toward her. "We discovered a group of a very rare creature some years ago, the bloodworm," she continued, and an immediate stir spread through the more knowledgeable members of the hall. The name alone was enough to raise tension. Bloodworms were legendary magical creatures, both dangerous and immensely valuable. 3 months ago, our containment facility was attacked, Cassandra said, her tone sharpening. Our security personnel were slaughtered, the wards torn apart as though they were parchment. Most of the bloodworms were destroyed, burned or ripped apart. But when we took count after the attack, we found one missing. She paused, drawing a slow, steadying breath. In his last moments, one of my keepers used his remaining strength to give me a description of the attacker. Her blue eyes swept over the assembly. A pale man, with red eyes. One man. Her voice rose slightly, emphasizing those final 2 words until the entire amphitheater felt the weight behind them. With that face, she said, chin lifting proudly, and with the history surrounding it, I believe we all know who he is. She named him anyway, her tone flat, fearless. Voldemort. The very name sent a shockwave through the gathered crowd. Murmurs erupted across the British delegation, with only Simon remaining calm and silent, his expression as if he had expected what was happening. The British Minister of Magic leapt to his feet, his face red with outrage. The Dark Lord is dead, he thundered. Killed by Harry Potter. I understand that your interests may have been harmed by a dark wizard, Lady Stormwell, but I am certain it was not him. Cassandra turned to him slowly, her expression laced with open contempt. And how old was this Harry Potter, she asked coolly, when he defeated one of the strongest dark wizards to ever live? The minister hesitated, then answered stiffly, he was an infant. Her eyebrow arched higher. And how exactly would a baby defeat a Dark Lord? The minister faltered, clearly struggling to respond, when one of his aides spoke up hastily to cover for him. Harry Potter is the child of prophecy. Fate itself aided him in that moment. The murmurs grew louder, half disbelieving and half skeptical. Order! Order! Dumbledore's calm voice rang out as he struck the gavel firmly. When silence returned, he addressed the assembly. With all the gathered evidence, he said evenly, it is clear that there is a powerful dark wizard at large. Instead of speculating endlessly about identity, let us focus our efforts on cooperation on containment, investigation, and defense. His piercing blue eyes swept across the crowd, lingering briefly on Simon, then Cassandra. Let us remember why we gather here, to unite against threats to the magical world, not to tear each other apart. A/N, it took me a while to write this chapter and I am still not satisfied, please leave your thoughts on the chapter before leaving. Power Stone and reviews please my people. Chapter 57, The Forbidden Name. If a delegate wished to speak at the conference, they had to point their wand at the sigil on their platform, the symbol would glow faintly and a signal would be sent to the speaker. Dumbledore noticed the light flicker from the alchemy sect's emblem and glanced toward the old man beside it. Our new members from the alchemy sect wish to speak, he announced calmly. The sect master's sigil glowed softly as he rose and addressed the hall. Thank you, he began. There was an attempt made by a dark wizard on our sect as well. He then turned to Dumbledore. Do I have permission to bring the man in, so he can enlighten the council about his motives? This is not a court for judgment, a British councilman objected immediately. His judgment was decided the moment he stepped foot in my sect, the sect master said sharply, glancing at the man. His voice was calm but carried an edge. I am allowing the council a chance to be better informed of the threat, that is all. Dumbledore seemed deep in contemplation, then nodded. We shall vote for the hearing. The vote took only 5 minutes. Soon, a man in grey attire was brought into the chamber. He was shackled and seemed in a daze, his movements stiff as he was guided to the center of the hall. A temporary seating was arranged for him, while Dumbledore stood to conduct the hearing. State the nature of your crime, Dumbledore commanded. The man had been given Veritaserum, and his lips moved as if against his will. I learned of the rising power of the alchemy sect. I wished to obtain something for, my lord. He gritted his teeth so hard they made an audible sound by the end. What did you wish to obtain? Dumbledore asked, his voice calm but heavy. He wants dark CCC creatures, the man stammered, breathing hard. Dumbledore's eyes dimmed. Who? He asked simply. Gasps rippled through the hall. How is this allowed? British and French voices rose in alarm. Even the American delegates joined in protest. Simon, seated near the British minister, raised an eyebrow and silently noted the French wizards who had spoken most loudly. The prisoner shuddered violently. His name must not be spoken, he gasped. Must not be spoken. He repeated it again and again, fighting against the Veritaserum with visible strain. For the utterance of the name is forbidden, he babbled, rocking slightly. I must not speak. Please remove the man. This must stop. The chamber echoed with shouts as Dumbledore raised his hand, allowing the ward keepers to take the prisoner away. Silence fell. Dumbledore sat still for a long moment, his eyes closed in thought. When he opened them, he saw a signal from the hawthorn sigil glowing faintly. He glanced at Simon and gave a small nod. Lord Hawthorne, please share your thoughts, Dumbledore said, leaning back slightly. Simon rose, his expression unreadable. He swept his gaze across the assembly before speaking. Dark wizards are not uncommon in the world, he began evenly. There have been many throughout the ages. There was a wizard named Mbala from Zimbabwe who caused great destruction. The Zimbabwe representative bowed his head in quiet acknowledgement. The year before that, there was one in Korea and Japan as well. Simon paused briefly. And it is the people in this room who are responsible for protecting our people, he said, his tone deepening. I extend a hand. As the patriarch of House Hawthorne, any who accept will have my support in any situation like this. His gaze shifted toward the alchemy sect master and the sanctum master. And the support of everyone who accepts my offer today. It took little time for responses to come. The alchemy sect accepts. The spirit sanctum accepts. The Council of Hidden Peaks accepts, announced the Nepalese magical authority. One by one, other countries and societies gave their assent. Simon was unsurprised. He knew the majority were seeking political ties and trade more than direct martial aid. Only the sect and the sanctum possessed the power to rival some nations in magical might, and they had already pledged to him. He offered this alliance as an open invitation, a chance for others to step closer to House Hawthorne and gain mutual benefit. Even the smallest acceptance meant new trading routes, national-level agreements, and access to resources that would elevate everyone involved. Simon's purpose for attending this meeting was simple, to reach out a hand and raise all who took it. A/N, Power Stones and Reviews please.